2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because, as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning and welcome to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Very much appreciate you joining me. I've got my mic plugged in now. It does help, doesn't it? Funny that. I am on DAB Plus radio and on your smart speaker, or you can watch us on YouTube or your connected device. Whichever way you're joining us, it is great to have your company. And again, I know a lot of you got the kids on Easter holidays, take a little break, enjoy, and have a little bit of, we like to think, sanity and common sense for a few hours. Anyway, it's great that you've joined us. Lots to talk about in this hour. Yeah, we are going to have to talk more about tariffs. I know, we're going to have to talk about it, but Donald Trump announced that 90-day pause on tariffs for most countries around the world. Did not respond with reciprocal measures. Of course, we're all still stuck with the 10% base. Everyone's got that on them, apart from China, that have got 125%. So that trade war between China and US, we might think, oh, we're escaping that. No, we already have tariffs ourselves, and every other country has tariffs with America, unless or until there is a free trade deal or something happens in the next 90 days of that pause. But crucially, we will all be affected by that trade war between China and the US. But was this all part of the plan, as the White House press secretary suggested yesterday in a press conference, or did he have to back down because the markets were plummeting and the cost of US borrowing had gone sky high as well? Love to hear your thoughts on that. Also going to be talking about policing. Two big stories there. The Home Secretary's announced that police forces must ensure extra patrols by officers during peak times in busy areas, or they will risk losing additional government funding. But you'd think that was kind of basic, wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you be patrolling the streets at peak times when there's lots of people around and a higher chance of crime? For instance, I don't know, Friday night, Saturday night, shopping times on the high street, 4 or 5 p.m. Wouldn't that be the obvious time to have your police out and about when all those crimes are being committed? And why wouldn't a police constable or police chief constable, why would they not be doing that already? Because if they're not doing that already and they are having to be told to do it, maybe we shouldn't be having those people in the job. Throwing that out there, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, along with West Yorkshire Police, one of our biggest police forces in the country. According to a whistleblower, they've temporarily halted applications from white British candidates in a bid, they say, to improve diversity. Basically, if you're white, you're going to have to wait until a certain period where they open up applications again. And if you're of any ethnic minority group, no, come on in. You can put your application in any time, because they say they simply don't have enough people who are from different diverse backgrounds to police local people. Does it really matter, the colour of the skin? The ethnic race of the person who is policing you? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Do give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. You can text on 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls, as you know, are charged at the national rate, and text costs £1 standard network rate message. Well, joining me for all the chat today about this and plenty of other stories, I'm delighted to say, back again, journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth. Very good morning.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much. You were getting a bit of grief from people online last week. Great fun to watch, by the way. Well done, everybody.
Yes, I think almost 500,000 people got angry about what I said last week. So let's see if we can.
I can't even remember what it was.
Well, it was about whether we should build houses and change the tax so that young people like me can have an easier life.
You were doing your poverty-stricken young person thing. I mean, I was quite sympathetic to him. So you know, there we are. But then you'll just call me an old lefty if I say that. But you know, I'm very much of the view. Certainly, you know, my parents' generation did very nicely, thank you. They weren't fighting wars, protecting us. They just got all the benefits of the post-war deal, and a lot of us are dealing with the fallout of that. But your generation more so than mine. Well, is that the case also when it comes to the tariff story? Because there is a big debate in terms of this idea that, you know, free trade is everything, and look, there's no doubt at all. You know, capitalism, free trade, this has been the driving force for people getting rich. And I know a lot of people are feeling very much poor at the moment. We've had high inflation. People's standards of living hasn't gone up for many, many years for a lot of people. But overall, we are so much better off than we were, say, like when I was a child in the 70s. I'm sorry, it's a different world. And much better wallpaper now. I'd like to throw that in too. Although the flares are all still around, aren't they?
They're back in.
I know. Well, they've gone in and out back in 3 or 4 times. I'm old, Benjamin. This has happened many times. It's like the ABBA revival. Yeah, every 10 years. Which one are we on now? You're permanently living in an ABBA revival.
ABBA.
Well, I know, exactly. Yeah. There we are. You know where we're coming from, guys. Anyway, we are so much better off. And a lot of that has been down to, it's down to capitalism. It's down to free market trading. But there is also a cost. And we saw that. That's one of the reasons why I voted for Brexit. That actually, anyone can live anywhere and anyone can buy anything from anywhere. That's all very well. But actually, it does mean that some people, actually, especially often at the bottom end of the pile, people we should be looking after the most, they basically can't see their wages going up because they're competing with, you know, free labour from abroad or cheap labour from abroad, and they can't compete with goods that are made with that cheap labour from abroad. And I get the point of what Donald Trump was trying to say. He wants to bring people back, bring their companies back to the US, and so those jobs are in the US, and not having all these goods going in and out all the time, and basically everyone who's running these big companies is making money, but actually it's sort of the little man on Main Street as opposed to the big man in Wall Street who is losing out. I get the point. I'm not sure that tariffs and what he was planning to do with the rest of the world was a good idea. Yesterday, shock announcement, only hours after he told people, stay cool, everything's going to work out well, everything's fine. Suddenly, out of the blue, we had the announcement that we were going to see a 90-day pause in those tariffs. So anybody who's on anything above 10%, most of the world's on 10%, about 57 countries, they were brought back down to the 10% mark. That carries on. So we haven't got a pause in tariffs. We're exactly where we were before yesterday. Apart from China, who have retaliated with their own tariffs, always equalising whatever it is the US has done, never ramping it up above that. I would say it's been America ramping that up, not China. America then put on a total tariff of 125% on all Chinese goods. Mexicans, the Canadians, they still face 25% tariffs as well. So most of us, though, around the world, 10% tariff, which we didn't have before, nothing like that. So we are still in a bad situation with tariffs. It's still going to cut jobs here and cut expansion here. But it's better than it could have been because the world economy may be not in such crisis. Why did Donald Trump do this? That's the question. Because Caroline Levitt, the White House press secretary and the trade secretary, say, look, he's a genius, he's very brave, he's very courageous, and he's brilliant, and this is all part of the plan. Or was it because he saw the boss of JP Morgan on Fox News Business telling just a few hours earlier, saying this is an absolute disaster.
Yeah, I think the boss of JP Morgan said that there's about a 35% chance of a recession in America.
I think it was more than 35%.
And then, you know, after that, it was sort of, people were saying that it's almost a certainty that there'd be a recession. Of course, it makes sense. I mean, what's gone on is a complete disaster because, you know, you think about American businesses who will have regular imports of Chinese products. Maybe they take $100,000 a week. Suddenly they're going to have an enormous fine, effectively, to pay the government of even more than what they import. I mean, that's just going to destroy medium-sized US businesses overnight.
And the huge cost of big business. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, again, a huge amount of American businesses actually import goods from China as part of their business. But if those more than double in price, which is what that means, that 104% tax, wasn't it? But now 125%. It becomes untenable. We know jobs are going to be lost in China as well, but we're all going to be affected by it. But they're playing this as like all part of the plan. And Donald Trump's talking about how all these countries are knocking on his door. He's had phone calls from 75 countries asking for some sort of trade deal. Understandable. We will have been on that long list of calls. Do you think there's any chance we will get some sort of trade deal? I mean, that's what we've always wanted. And will it be on terms that we want?
I mean, Donald Trump, he's in his 5th year as US president now, and we've not got close to a trade deal before. And so I think, you know, we're
told it's virtually there.
Yeah, we are, but mainly by people from the UK government. I don't think you hear the US government saying that. And of course, it would be convenient for British politicians. It seems unlikely, and I think this isn't going to make it any more likely because they've got 184 other countries to deal with at the moment. How do they have the capacity to go through this? And I think that, you know, this is going to be a big problem for us because if there is also an inflamed trade war with the EU, well, that's still our main trading partner. So that's going to have a significant knock-on effect. But I think there are positives to this, you know, because, first of all, oil prices are falling a little, which is good news because there's more supply than there is demand, because this is going to reduce global demand.
Yeah, that's like the people who were cheering, isn't it great, you know, we've got a cleaner environment because of lockdown. I mean, you know, that's not... Lower demand for oil is not a good thing, Benjamin.
Well, I mean, it's a good thing in the short term, right? It's something to be positive about. And also government bonds. You know, when everything goes crazy, people want to put their money in those. And so we're talking about Rachel Reeves and the flexibility she has with her borrowing. Well, borrowing costs might go down from this because of supply and demand of government bonds. Yeah, but so there might be some good news.
It may be more of a mixed bag. I don't think overall it is good news for us. But of course,
I'm trying to find the positive.
I know one of the things the government is hinting at, again, we should get closer to the EU as well and get a trade deal with the EU. Of course, it's the EU that wanted to punish us. We could have had free trade, no problem. That was absolutely on the cards. Let's have a free trade deal with the EU. The EU made it very clear, unless you agree to free movement of people as well as free movement of trade, goods and services, then that's not on the cards. It is bizarrely on the cards, you know, for Canada or was it New Zealand, but apparently not for us because they want to have free movement of people. Well, that's not something that British people want. They voted very clearly against that. We know it's what the entire British Labour cabinet want. It's all very well they might want to do that, and there'll be trade-offs. And even if we get to talk about trade deal with India, like there's going to be a trade-off in terms of visas. The British people don't want it. They're done. They're done with having pretty much anyone who in the world wants to come and just move here and work here, often for cheaper labour. If you're a high earner, you can always come and work here. There's going to be a problem. You can always get some sort of high-skilled visa. It's people just turning up and doing the low-skilled work and the low-fee work that create a problem for other workers in this country. Do you think that's what Labour's going to try and do?
Well, I mean, they've said that they're not going to have freedom of movement.
They've said that. Doesn't mean that's not what they're going to do.
I don't think they will. Not like what we had when we were in the EU. There is this question of whether under 30s would be allowed to have freedom of movement.
They're the people who are most likely to move.
Yeah,
and compete on for the low-skilled jobs.
But they're also, in many ways, ideal people to have in the country because you're not paying for their education, they're probably healthy, and they just want to work and generate tax revenue.
No. Unless they're highly skilled and they're earning more than 45k a year, they're a net cost to us.
Well, I mean, they're not a net cost if they come here and pay taxes.
No. If they are working and they pay tax... This is guys. This is where we are. This is where we are with the left. How does that work? Even people in Britain. No, Because the amount of services you use, the fact that you may need to go to A&E for some point, you may need to use your GP, you drive on roads that are paid for by public services, there is street lighting, there is fire, there is police, there are a whole load of things that the public services that are provided to us. Unless you are earning more than, I think it's around the figure of 45k, it may have even gone up by now, you are not a net contributor, because the amount of tax you pay in doesn't actually pay for the service, your share of the services used per capita. That is the crucial thing. We need people who are, hey, if you're a multimillionaire, come on in, pay some taxes and help fund the rest of us. But otherwise, you're not. And what you're also doing is you're working, you're in Starbucks or in the supermarket or as a taxi driver, and you are driving down wages for other British people. That's not in our interest. I'm sorry, it isn't.
I mean, I don't accept that. Because...
Well, you're not accept it, but it's fact.
Right, but there's another question
You can't make up your own facts.
But hang on. Let's look at what's the biggest thing that's projected for this country to have growth, and it's building houses. We don't have enough people in this country to build the number of houses that is projected to be built. So we need to take in more Polish people, for example. Because Polish people are uniquely good at building. Why don't we train up our own young people to be builders? Fine, but
what do you mean fine? That's exact. But no, but the companies aren't going to do that because they can just import someone who'll probably work more cheaply. They don't have to train up. That's the problem. That's why we are where we are right now.
But if it were the case that we could simply generate all those builders or generate those people...
Not out of the blue, you have to actually bother training them. But there's never been an incentive for the country, for the government, for businesses to train people up, or indeed an incentive for a lot of those young people to bother to get trained up. You need to cut welfare for young people. I mean, make it virtually impossible to get, in my view. People need to be trained up. They need to turn up to work. We need to train up people to do the job so we don't have to import people who, by the way, if you import people to build houses... I'm going to break this to you because I know the left don't really do a lot of these sort of thinking how things actually work together, joined up thinking. But those builders might need somewhere to live. So you're going to import more people to build houses who need more houses. But do the maths.
But they tend not to stay here for a long time. These are transient
You've got some figures on that, have you?
Well, we know that most people that came from the EU have gone back. They come here, they want to make money, and then they go back to their home country. If you speak to many of those people, they don't say they want to live here forever. They don't say they hated their country. They come here for work.
They hate their country.
And so they come here, they pay taxes, they do essential services like care homes and nursing, which is overwhelmingly foreign-born.
We could perfectly easily employ British people to do. We just don't pay them enough. The reason why they do this job is because we don't pay people enough to stay here from here. Anyway, I want to get... Can we please talk about the topic I'm actually going to ask my audience? You feel free to have your say and put this young man right at any time. I want to talk also about policing. A number of policing stories today. One is Home Secretary Yvette Cooper. She's been out and about today. Never come on my show, Yvette. I don't know why. I do know why. But basically announcing that there's going to be a requirement for police forces to have more bobbies on the beat, basically. Pledging more weekend police patrols to tackle street crime. And basically the idea is when it's a busy area, particularly on Friday and Saturday nights, that this is from July in England and Wales, there's the area she covers. As part of the crackdown on antisocial behaviour, police officers will be required to patrol those busy areas. I mean, this is mind-blowing stuff. Places where there are lots of people where there might be greater crime, the police should be around there. Any chief constable that is not already doing this should be sacked on the spot automatically. The people who are already doing this don't need to be told to do this. So this is yet another utterly pointless, absurd announcement from the Home Secretary pretending to be doing something at a time when, by the way, like the Met Police, the biggest police force in the country, they are busy, bizarrely, cutting police numbers because they haven't got enough money because, they can't afford them because, of course, the cost of national insurance has been imposed on the police alongside everyone else. And at the same time, one of our biggest police forces, West Yorkshire Police, are currently preventing white British candidates from applying for jobs because they want to have more ethnic minority candidates to make their diversity targets look better. So, I mean, again, talking about joined-up thinking, none of that applies to the police, does it?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, this sort of smacks of an election coming up to say there'll be named neighbourhood officers that you can contact and more people on the beat. I mean, you know, I dare say most places already have this idea, and if they're not doing it, it might be because of policing numbers, and policing numbers are at risk.
Incompetent police chiefs.
Indeed, but I mean, it does blow my mind that visibility of police officers isn't prioritised more. A couple of years ago, I was threatened with a knife and had my phone stolen on the South Bank. Yeah. And that is an area in London where there is constantly phone thefts. And when I reported it to the police, they said, there are undercover officers that operate in the area. I said, well, it's not working, is it? Because I know 2 other other people that got mugged in the same spot. If there had been visible police officers, the gangs of thefts wouldn't have happened in the first place.
The undercover officers only work if they're actually arresting people. One of the things that breaks my soul around my local area is, we have, the people riding, incredibly fast on pavements right by, little kids wandering to primary school and going through the red lights and all of that. OK, first world problems, really. Nice to have those problems, but we had a lot of thefts, a lot of shoplifting in the area as well. And every now and then, periodically, you'll have a load of police officers, highly visible, big, yellow vests as well, look at me, don't commit crime while I'm here. Brilliant. And then you go, and then all the shoplifters and the phone snatchers and the bag snatchers and the bicyclists that go through the red lights and risk injury to kids on crossings, they return. I keep saying to them, could you please turn up here plain clothes and watch and get videos of people and then arrest them? Because the whole point is they know when you're here and they don't commit the crimes when you're here. If they were there every day and they deterred the crime, brilliant. But they're not. They're there once a month, once every 2 months. So it doesn't actually have an impact. And it's just no good. But again, I've not had any training as a police officer, but if I can work that out, how come they can't?
Yeah, I can see the logic of that, but if they have visible police officers in town centres, then it dispels it from becoming attracting criminals all the time.
Yeah, if you walk through a big busy area and there are lots of police everywhere, it's like if you go to a club, yes, I still do that, and there are bouncers, and literally, no, but genuinely, they're literally, you can see that they are on top of it. Oh yeah, but they're on top of things, and so girls are not being harassed on the dance floor and things. They look, that I've got a bouncer right there, and I get in trouble from you. That works, but they're not there. Once every 2 months isn't going to make a difference.
And also, what are the consequences? So even if the police officer catches them, if it's something like shop theft or shoplifting, well, actually, chances are the police won't turn up when they're told, and even if they do, there won't be a punishment. Yeah. I think that this government is getting rid of the rule that said anything under 200 quid, basically, you're allowed to steal.
It's free.
They're dropping that, but then, will there be consequences for people that are caught?
We know that there aren't enough prison places, and there's a report today that actually, in a sentencing guidelines, they're going to have to put 9,000 fewer people behind bars because they haven't got the spaces. They are building more prisons, but not enough quickly enough. Well, I want to hear from you, and I want to come on to this, the West Yorkshire Police, but the Home Secretary is going to require police to patrol busy areas at peak times and a crackdown on antisocial behaviour. Duh. Seriously, what are they doing if they're not already doing that? Have you completely lost faith in the police? We've got two-tier policing, failure to prosecute basic crimes. It took me, 9 months, what it was, to get my bag my bag thief prosecuted. I hasn't gone to court yet, obviously. Don't be silly, people. It was only last June. If police chiefs, their priority is apparently, getting more black and Asian officers in rather than more white officers. I think most of us, our priority is just having more officers and having them doing the job we want them to do, preventing crime and solving crime and nabbing criminals. I thought that's what they did instead of attending, pride marches with rainbow face paints on. I've just totally lost faith. I've just totally lost faith in police. I think a lot of police constables, a lot of police officers have lost faith in the police. I know a large number of police officers who are literally just sitting there, TikTok, waiting for their retirement because they have just had enough. I want to hear your thoughts on all this. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text on 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV as well. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. Benjamin Butterworth, just finally on the West Yorkshire Police wanting more ethnic police officers, ethnic minority. They say they've got 30% of people of ethnic minority in the area they cover, and only 9% of officers are from a diverse background. I would say 9% is pretty high. I believe that is roughly comparable with the national statistics. Why do you need a black police officer to patrol a black area or an Asian officer to patrol an Asian area? It's good if they're not all white. I get that. But does it really matter?
Diverse background is such a strange phrase. I feel like it doesn't mean anything in the real world. But, look, I think it's fine to want more people that look like the community because you might get better trust. But the problem where this has become warped is that it's at the expense of just getting enough people who are officers or who are in the army
to do the job.
We're not overwhelmed by people wanting to be police officers or wanting to serve in the armed forces. We are short on both these cases, and you've seen examples like this. And so the idea of turning down a white candidate just on that principle is completely counterintuitive.
See, he could be sensible sometimes. I'm rubbing off on him. Benjamin Butterworth, thank you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Get your calls in 0344 499 1000 as always, and any of the topics we're talking about. Lots more to talk about as well. And lots more top guests as well. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Harry and Meghan basically felt that they were singled out for inferior treatment, and they had to step back as working royals.
Well, I think what his barrister has said is complete and utter poppycock, to be perfectly honest. Look, Harry was the one who made the decision that he wanted to go and live in America and make his own money. Yep. Absolutely fine. No problems whatsoever. Yep. Whatever's happened under the bridge and everything else, whatever. He cannot expect to have a gun bodyguard on standby just in case he decides to turn up here again.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Still with me, of course, Benjamin Butterworth. Lots more to talk about on the show, throughout the show. We're going to come back to tariffs, and we are going to be talking to one of Donald Trump's advisors who's been sitting in those tariff meetings at the White House to find out what's really going on in terms of those decisions. Love to hear your thoughts on why you think Donald Trump has decided to do that 90-day pause. Was it all part of the plan? Is that what we're being told? Is it all part of the plan and it's all his genius at work, or was he actually scared of the fact that we're looking at a recession in the United States, a worldwide recession, and markets were plummeting, and indeed, very particularly, US government borrowing costs were going up, and you think we've got a big debt? Wow! Take a look at the trillions that America owes. Oh, by the way, a lot of that debt owned by China. Well, or as it's Donald Trump calls it, China. Anyway. I love it, it says China. Anyway, let's get to your phone calls coming in thick and fast about the police. I'm asking you about the Home Secretary requiring police. They'll lose funding if they don't patrol busy areas at peak times, like Friday and Saturday night town centres. But why on earth wouldn't they be doing that already? So this is either a load of nonsense, it's happening already, or you've got a load of police chiefs who are really bad at their job and need to be ousted from their job. Either way, this is a bizarre announcement. Your reaction to this, 0344 499 1000, plus the West Yorkshire Police apparently giving priority to anyone who's not white as a candidate for the police. But why does the colour of your skin matter if you're doing a job where you're representing the whole of society? Let's go to your call. Alan is on the line. He's in Salford. Hello, Alan.
Good morning, Julie.
Good morning, my lovely. What do you want to say?
Well, I'm at an age. I'm 72, so I've known, life in Salford, where I'm from. I have no confidence whatsoever in the police force now. I'm afraid they're all sort of height challenged. They're all dwarfs. They're all overweight. I'm sorry to say.
They don't. I mean, I have to say the physical requirements on police officers do seem to have changed. But I've been told by many police or big burly guys that actually often having a sort of a petite woman, when they're trying to deal with someone who's really out of control, can actually bizarrely help. It can calm things down.
I understand that, but apparently they've got to have degrees now before they become policemen. I like the old policeman that was on the beat that move up. And as for these heads of the police who come straight out of the, this college of, get them in quicker.
Oh, the College of Policing is an absolute disaster and should be abolished today, no question. So you're just you don't have any faith in the police officers who are coming in. Say the police officers I know who've had 20 years of service and they are literally counting down to get their full pension. So that they can leave because they just feel like this isn't the job they joined. They're not able to do the job of policing anymore.
Exactly. And as soon as they started putting them in cars, you want them back on the beat. It should have, they cut the numbers all the time, and they should be back on the beat. This is where they should be.
Yeah, exactly. What do you make of the idea that the Home Secretary needs to tell police chiefs, can you put police officers at basically high crime risk areas and times at the weekend, for instance? I mean, should a chief constable need to be told that, or should that be policing 101?
That should have been a police. They should be in charge. Half of these fellas in charge have not got a clue.
Yeah, that is my worry.
They've no idea about policing. You've never been on the beat, half of them.
Yeah, but they've passed all their diversity training. They're very good at diversity training, and they've got all the correct preferred pronouns, David. So I'm sorry, Alan. So they're good at their job.
They're very good at picking up bad tweets, hurty tweets, And that lady who got 31 months is a disgrace. I know she shouldn't have said what she said about burning in Moscow.
That's Lucy Connolly, yeah.
No, it was wrong what she said, but there's no need to, 31 months, and you're getting these people doing all sorts of other crap. and they're getting nothing. It's scandalous.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. Alan, thank you very much. And again, case after case after case we hear where people commit actual violent crimes and then get sent to jail, or repeat offenders. And again, I thought what Lucy Connolly wrote was absolutely foul tweet, but she agreed that it was because she'd actually deleted it afterwards. And a lot of I changed my tune on this issue because a lot of the reporting on this at the time and what was said in court was actually very misrepresentative of her and indeed of what she'd even told police. So abject failures, I think, abject failure by her solicitor, I think, telling her to plead guilty at the time. But there we are. Let's go to David. He's on the line in London. Hello, David. What do you want to say?
Julia.
Hello.
Morning, Julia. Morning, Benjamin. In regards of police numbers and being on the spot kind of thing, there is a synagogue in Southend that has been told this weekend, has been advised by the police, that due to a Palestinian solidarity march going on, that they shouldn't open this Saturday because they don't think they've got enough police to cover both the march.
That is
and
absolutely outrageous. And again, if they think that there is an issue of safety for Jews going to synagogue on their day of worship, then they, as a result of that march, then that march shouldn't be allowed to go ahead. If it's a peaceful march, non-threatening, or they could, I don't know, as we've had issues in London, haven't we? The insistence of some pro-Palestinian marchers that they have to go past some large synagogues in central London. You don't really, do you? You could just not go past those synagogues and not cause people any distress or alarm or fear.
Exactly, but they're putting it down to we don't have enough police to do both.
That is absolutely outrageous. I mean, again, in that scenario, I would say you delay the protest. Maybe the protest could go on a Sunday when people aren't at the synagogue.
Exactly.
That tells you everything, doesn't it? Oh, that is absolutely outrageous. We'll look into that, David. Thank you very much indeed. Appreciate that. Benjamin Butterworth, just your response to that. I mean, this thing, the police seem to always have, like the 6 coppers turning up on the doorstep of people who've written emails to their school, or 2 coppers turning up to Alison Pearson's doorstep, or people arresting, Lucy Connolly after the Southport attacks for writing something on Twitter that had already been deleted, but not turning up to what most people would regard as actual crimes. That is losing a lot of people who would normally be great defenders of the police. It's losing a lot of their confidence.
I mean, I have to say, I really don't have great faith in the police, and I think a lot of it comes down to officers being incompetent. I mean, there are so many examples of that. That Southend example then is actually, quite shocking.
But that'll be a police chief decision.
But the idea that, when these protests happen, and protests are legitimate in a democracy, but there seemingly is always police officers for protests, whatever shade of protest it is, and yet someone's right to worship, which I would consider also to be a human right, apparently doesn't pass that. You made exactly the suggestion, move it to a Sunday, then you can do both.
It's really simple, isn't it?
Because you have to get permission to do a protest so that they have the policing numbers. Well, the police should have said you do it on another day because we can't protect the local Jewish community as well.
And by the way, why does the synagogue need protecting? Because you've got a peaceful march. Why, because it's not a pro-Palestinian march. I'm sorry, these are anti-Israeli, they're anti-Jewish marches. These are anti-Semitic, pro-Hamas marches. That's what they are. Let's call them what they are. A lot of the organised these marches, certainly the ones in London, are actually, people who've got close contacts with Hamas. By the way, they're in the news as well. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. The Hamas just extraordinarily appealing, using the European Convention on Human Rights against them being prescribed as a terror organisation because apparently it infringes their freedom of speech. You couldn't make it up, except you could in this country because it's exactly the sort of madness that happens here. We're going to go to a quick break, then we're going to be talking to Conservative peer Lord Moylan about all of the big stories. Plenty more top guests coming. This is Talk.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Benjamin Butterworth still here as well. I'm delighted to be joined now by Conservative peer Lord Moylan. He's also a front bench opposition member on the Lords. Very good morning to you, Lord Moylan.
Good morning, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. I'm probably doing a little bit better than anyone trying to export anything to the United States right now. What did you make of the announcement from Donald Trump? Some of the headlines saying he blinked, basically in the face of turmoil on the markets and fears of a recession in the UK, not just the US, in fact, world recession. But when he basically announced a 90-day pause in tariffs for countries which have got over 10% tariffs, we're still stuck with our 10%, as is the rest of the world, apart from Mexico and Canada. They're on 25%. And of course, we've got those 25% tariffs on aluminium and steel. But China still facing now a huge bump to 125%. What do you think motivated Donald Trump to change his mind for most of the rest of the world?
Well, I must say it's difficult to discern the pattern and the strategy in what he's doing. And I wouldn't like to guess what it was. I mean, clearly the market turmoil was starting to hurt. And I think that did have an effect on him. But if he says he's doing it all to mess things up and break things and so, loosen up the situation so that he can get into negotiations, there may be some truth in that. But I suspect this immediate reaction was more short-term pain.
There's also talk that actually he'd been watching Fox News Business and they've been in an interview with the boss of JP Morgan. And basically that was what influenced him the most, because it was a volte-face over 4 hours. Things changed. We're going to be talking a little later in the show to someone who's in the room discussing those tariffs. Hopefully we will. In terms of where we are right now, how is all this going to be affecting the British economy?
Well, it's not necessarily very good, but I think the great thing is that we can do things to offset it to some degree, because we know what gets economic activity going. We know that you need a certain amount of deregulation. You need to start bringing down taxes on employment and taxes on profits. You need to encourage investment, because British businesses, many of which in the manufacturing sector are quite small actually, they can be very fleet of foot. And that's what you need on occasions like this. I mean, there are opportunities that arise. There are things that China sells to America, which are going to have a large tariff put on them now, that maybe, we have the opportunity, if we're quick enough, to get in and sell things like that, advanced components and things of that sort.
Because we won't be subject to those tariffs. So even though we've got higher labour costs, that could be offset by that. Isn't there a worry, though, that China is going to start dumping a lot of their goods on, markets like Europe, like Britain, because we've got the consumers able to afford it, but that could actually again compete with a lot of our own homegrown manufacturing. Well,
you tell me what it is we import from China that we do actually produce here at home, and there isn't very much, because we don't produce that much at home. So I mean, I don't know. Do we make fridges in this country, Julia? You'd know that.
I don't know. I'm probably guessing we don't make large numbers of them if we do.
Every fridge I see seems to be made abroad and not in Europe even. So does it? Are we not actually a bit of dumping? Doesn't that mean we actually get fridges half price? What's wrong with that?
So we may end up benefiting.
Are we putting a British fridge making business out of business as a result of that?
Come on, can someone look that up? Is there a British fridge maker?
I don't know the answer. No. Some of this dumping can actually be really rather good. I wouldn't mind going around the shops.
But of course, you know as well as I do, we still have we still have those 10% tariffs, and again, most of our exports do go to the EU, but as a single country, America is our biggest export market. But we also know that when there is a worldwide set of tariffs, that has an impact. Look, that puts prices up, puts costs up. We know that that's going to be a concern for the world economy. And again, we can't escape the waves that come in from the world, can we?
None of this is good, I agree. But then 87 or something percent, over 80% of our economy is in services, which we don't actually are not subject to tariffs. Yeah. We're not as dependent on goods trade as many other countries, certainly not as dependent as Germany. If we had a government...
Is that a good thing? I mean, that's the thing. We kind of say, oh, it's great, we're in services, but is that a good thing?
Well, it depends. I mean, it gives a lot of good jobs to people as well. The question is, does it also give jobs to people who have been more traditionally dependent on manufacturing time?
Yeah.
And that's a really good question, and maybe we're not getting that balance right. But lots of people who work in services, you're one of them, for example, you know, you don't do too badly out of it, and nor do your colleagues who work with you in the studio. So these are good jobs. They're jobs you'd like to have, better than being down a pit, for example.
This is very true. This is very true.
Not service jobs.
Okay, no, that's all a fair point. Can I move on? Can I talk to you about some subject we're asking our audience about today in terms of policing? The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has announced she's going to basically withhold funding for police if they do not do as she requires, patrol busy areas at peak times in a crackdown on antisocial behaviour. And I suppose I also want to talk to you about West Yorkshire Police as well, and specifically, but I find it utterly bizarre that any police force isn't already doing this in the first place, in which case is this just utterly pointless words, or do we actually have some chief constables who are not doing this who need to be sacked on the spot?
Well, I don't know about what chief constables are doing in different forces, but I mean, you're absolutely right. In principle, this is basic policing, and you need to be out there because a police presence on the street is meant to be there to reassure the public and to allow ordinary life to go on in a peaceful and comfortable fashion where you have a high trust society and you're not constantly fearful of other people. And that's what makes us a civilized place to live. You lose that, and everyone starts being fearful, and it becomes quite dangerous.
Lots of people would say we've already lost that. We're not a high trust society anymore, and people are fearful.
There are people who say that, but I think there's still something to fight for there in getting that back. Now, good police presence on the streets is important. I suspect there's what are we going to announce in recess going on? There's a machine in government which produces announcements every day. They're a bit stuck because Parliament's not sitting, so they've probably invented this one because it sounds good. But as you say, the moment you look at it and think about it, it's a bit empty and vacuous, and it ought to be going on.
How unusual from the Home Office, and again, it's a bit much, isn't it? Like, yeah, try and prevent crime and maybe fight some crime, and then they've got nowhere to put them because they want any prison places because they're all full of people who've written tweets or Facebook posts. Can I also ask you about West Yorkshire Police in particular? It's one of our biggest police forces, and a whistleblower has revealed that basically white people are temporarily blocked from applications to become police officers because they want to boost diversity. They say we've got 30% ethnic minority population that we police. We've only got 9% ethnic minority police officers, so we're going to close application temporarily to white officers and try and boost those from ethnic minorities, and then open it up to everybody. I mean, it's just racist, isn't it?
Yeah, and it sounds like it might actually be illegal as well. But I'm not going to comment on an individual police force because I don't know all the facts. But I will say that I think we've got to get this diversity bug out of the system, out of our public institutions, out of the civil service and the other forces we rely on, and out of the companies, the big companies that work for us, because it is taking us nowhere. It is tearing us apart as a country, and we need to get back to thinking about jobs being available to people on merit and doing our best to give all people the best chances and opportunities they have to make the most of their lives, irrespective of considerations like race or class or whatever, because they're essentially arbitrary distinctions. They have no relevance or validity.
What about we talk about community trust, and there have been lots, issues of racism among white officers in the past, with black communities, Asian communities saying they simply don't trust officers. That said, I know a number of black and Asian officers who then get accused of these awful phrases like, coconut and stuff. But why are you joining the police?
Yeah, I think you trust people who treat you well and decently, and I don't think skin colour is the determinant of that.
Okay.
I mean, I don't trust a white police officer more than I trust a black police officer, or vice versa. Do you? I mean, it is the way in which you're treated personally and institutionally that determines the trust.
I agree with you on all of that, but I know that the point a black person in the room would be saying, they would be saying, well, yeah, but if you've not had yourself, your family members, your friends, maybe members of your community, feeling that they have been the victims of police racism by white officers. And we've had that report, years back about Stephen Lawrence and institutional racism in the Met, for instance. That it's easy as a white person to say, it doesn't bother me. A black person or an Asian person might feel differently. If you've been stopped by the police every week, I don't know about you, if I drive a nice car, were I to own a nice car, wouldn't expect to be stopped by the police, but I know plenty of black people who, when they drive a nice car, are stopped by the police regularly.
Yeah. We had this argument 30 years ago about whether the police was institutionally racist, and the sort of news you're telling us today, whether it's true about Yorkshire in particular, I don't know, but West Yorkshire in particular, but the sort of news you're telling us today seems to confirm that institutional racism has now been embedded.
In the opposite direction. Yeah, OK. Lord Boiler, we'll have to leave it there. Conservative peer, opposition front bench spokesman as well in the Laws. Benjamin Butterworth, I mean, this is just a different kind of racism. This has been going on massively in America, this sort of positive discrimination. But, discriminating on anything. I mean, I don't want quotas for the number of women. I don't expect 50% of police forces to be women either.
I mean, I do think American politics and American way of thinking has inflicted a lot on this country in different ways, and it just doesn't apply. Yeah. We're not as diverse as America. We're also not as divided as America, and we never have been. We have a very different history. But when you have these areas like policing where they don't have enough people that want to do the job full stop, well,
take anyone good.
Exactly. Take anyone that's capable of it. And I can think of a few police officers I've met that aren't capable of it and maybe shouldn't have been in the job.
Very interesting. I'd love, if you're a police officer, can you get in touch? I'd love to hear from you. I know we've got a lot of coppers who listen to the show. Because, again, we don't want to be dissing police officers. I think there are lots of fantastic, brilliant police officers who are just, again, their souls are being broken by how the police service is being run at the moment. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Firstly, this has happened in 50 towns. So 5 local inquiries is going to potentially give partial answers to 5 of those towns, but what about the other 45? Secondly, local inquiries have no statutory basis, which means they can't compel witnesses and they can't compel evidence. So, of course, if you are a councillor or a council official who's been complicit in these horrible crimes and you can't be compelled to go to an inquiry, you're not going to go.
What a surprise, Yeah,
unbelievable.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:50 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk more about these various policing stories with Nusrat Mehtab. She joins us. She's a former Scotland Yard superintendent. A very good morning to you, Nusrat.
Very good morning to you too.
It's actually a third story I want to get to. We've been talking about 2 of them. First of all, let's talk about these new measures apparently announced by Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, about putting neighbourhood bobbies back on the beat. I mean, I don't know. I've been a journalist for 30 years. I think I've written about this or talked about this about every 2 weeks in that for that entire time. We like to see police officers, we do, but this is particularly about having more police officers in the at peak times in busy areas like that Friday night, Saturday night in town. Is there any police force in this country that is not already doing that?
Well, they are doing it, but they just don't have the numbers to do it fully. So I think there's a little bit of smoking mirrors, Julia, because, you know, neighbourhood policing, put more bobbies on the beat. Where are they going to get them from? It's 13,000 or 30, yeah, I think it's 13,000 they want to put back on the beat.
Yeah.
Where are these people coming from? They're not going to be new officers. They're going to take them away. Some of them will be taken away from their duties already, and we know that they're struggling. Then there'll be community support officers and special constables. Now, special constables are volunteers.
Yeah.
And so that's going to cause a problem, but they should be doing that already, putting people on peak times. I think the idea is that they, you know, that you're going to have dedicated neighbourhood teams, dedicated contactable neighbourhood officer. We're going full circle to what used to be there before the government got rid of it.
But that's it. But even the contactable officer, I mean, I just have an email for the local, you know, copper, you know, overseeing everything in my area. But of course, you know, these people are allowed to have, you know, holidays. You know, they have weekends, they have families. They're not on shift every single day. So just one person. You mean having one direct email for, you know, and 3 people taking over that role? That would make sense. But it's just not realistic, is it?
No, I would agree with you there. I love the idea of neighbourhood policing because it works. And I think we all, like you said, all want to see bobbies on the beat. This isn't the issue. You know, to solve things, they'll be dealing with shoplifting, burglary, you know.
Really? When are they going out and doing that? I'd love to know when they're police doing that.
Well, Julia, they're not going to be able to do it because that isn't the issue.
We won't notice. They're not doing it anyway. I don't know anybody. Honestly, the local stores around my way, people I know who've had burglary, I've finally got them to agree to CPS to prosecute my bag thief. I've never seen a police officer. I've been on email the whole time. Never had a phone call. Never met anyone in person. Nothing.
But even if you did see them, the fact is the people that they're putting on the street, you know, community support officers have got a lot of you know, I've got a lot of support for community support officers, special constables. They just don't have the same powers as a regular police officer.
What can they do? I mean, can they, you know, chase after someone and arrest them?
No. So they can hold somebody and ask for a regular police officer to come. But if that person decided to walk off, they don't really have any special powers.
So they've got no more powers than we have. So I could do a citizen's arrest, but basically I'll get done for assault if I hold someone down, right?
Possibly,
just asking for a friend.
The thing is, Julia, it's not about putting more police officers on the street, although we love that idea as long as they've got the right powers to do it. The issue is that His Royal Majesty's Inspectorate has identified the issues are wider. There isn't the investigative mindset, there's inexperience.
But there's also this idea of like, well, we don't deal with a lot of low-level crime like shoplifting. It's not low-level crime if you're the person running the small shop that's having the stuff shoplifted. But also, you know, as we established, there's a small number of people committing a lot of crimes. It's the same people in my local high street who are committing all the shoplifting. If you just arrested, you know, 8 people, you'd have a 50%, 70% cut in the number of those shoplifting crimes. So it's crazy that it's not dealt with. I just don't think there's any strategic policing of what we call low-level crime anymore.
No, there isn't. But then the government is changing this because there's this wide immunity that if you steal anything below £200, that's okay. And I think criminals have got.
Well, it's still criminal. They just don't bother with it. They can still prosecute it. But they are changing that, aren't they? But that's the thing. I just do think that it's been policing choices, not often by the police officers on the ground, but the chief police, is that they've been prioritising different things, hurty tweets or whatever. I know there's a lot of serious crime. There's historic sex crimes and things like that involve a lot of work. I know there's a lot of the tech involves a lot of extra work as well. I get all that, but I mean, people just want this basic policing job done. What do you make of West Yorkshire Police? Bearing in mind we've got a recruitment crisis for the police already, but West Yorkshire Police, one of our biggest police forces, they're temporarily blocking applications from white candidates in an attempt to boost diversity. They said, well, look, we've got 30% of our local people are ethnically diverse and only 9% of our officers are, so we're going to give basically priority for this time period. And if you're white, you're not going to be allowed to apply, but if you're of an ethnic diversity background, you can apply. And I mean, you're from an ethnic minority in this country. Would you want anyone thinking that you needed priority because of the colour of your skin to get your job? Because as a woman, if someone gave me priority because I was a woman, I would be offended by that.
Yes, let me answer that. Let's get it clear as to what we're actually doing. And I think, we need clarity on this. What is positive? It's called positive action. It's not positive discrimination. Positive action. And I know you're thinking what they're doing is they're allowing these people and giving them extra support because they are short and they want a representative workforce, which I agree with. As long as it's positive action, it's not discrimination at the point. So what they're doing is they're saying to them, saying to people that are underrepresented, look, apply, we want you to apply and we'll give you the extra support to, encourage you, tell you what the job is about. But so you can apply all year round. And what we'll do is when we put the adverts out, then everybody else can apply. But at the point of actually going through the process wholly, going for the interviews, everybody's on an equal panel.
Yeah, but that can't be true because, there's no reason why you should stop white applicants applying all year round as well. If you're not going to get any more people from ethnic minorities getting into those jobs unless you are giving priority. Why not allow white candidates to apply all year round as well? Unless you're giving priority to those candidates from an ethnically minority background.
No, you're not giving priority to them. You're just saying to them, look,
they're not saying they're doing that. Just because they're not saying they're doing that, because that would be illegal, because it's racist, because judging people by the colour of their skin, last time I looked, was a bad thing and racist. But you say it's important and you agree with it should be representative. Why should the police force be representative, accurately representative of the wider population? Should it be 50% women? Should there be a percentage for gay people? Should there be a percentage for short people, for ginger people? Why should it be representative?
Well, it'd be representative because it helps the communities that you police.
Why?
It's important. Well, because if you've got 23% minority police communities, they may not be speaking English. They may not be able to relate to somebody else. So
Well, they should learn English then, if they live here.
Well, listen, Julia.
They should learn English.
They could learn English, but there's a generation of people that don't speak English. We should have racist policies for hiring police because these people come to this country and don't learn English. Doesn't seem the right priority at all. Julia, it's not racist. It's perfectly legal under the Equalities Act 2010 to have positive action.
It's racist. It might be legally racist, but it's racist.
Well, how is it racist, Julia? Giving somebody else, giving them the opportunity to apply, helping them.
If you discriminate between people based on the colour of their skin, that's racism.
But you're not discriminating, Julia. You're just giving somebody, saying to them, look...
You're making it easier for one group based on the colour of their skin. That's discrimination. That's racist.
Julia, it's not discrimination, it's not racist, because when it comes to actually getting the job, you're both on an even
But they're
deal.
not. You know that. They're just not saying the quiet bit out loud because they know that would be illegal.
Well, then, the whistleblower, and I have a lot of respect and a lot of time for whistleblowers, this needs to then be investigated and taken further.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. Oh, look, time is against us. You can hear the music. There are other stories I wanted to get to. Nusrat, I so appreciate you joining us. Thank you very, very much indeed. Nusrat Mehtab, former superintendent at Scotland Yard. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that conversation. Do get in touch. Love to hear from you, particularly if you are a police officer. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. I'll talk to Benjamin Butterworth about that conversation up next. This is Talk.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament. To respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because, as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. Well, it's been getting lively, has it not? This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's great to have your company, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you also to Benjamin Budworth, journalist and broadcaster, joining us too. Get your thoughts on what our last guest, Nusrat, had to say. I'm a very big fan of Nusrat. I disagree with her on this issue of basically, racial discrimination. As long as it's in favour of non-whites, then it's okay and legal in this country. I don't think it should be. We'll talk about that in relation to the police. Lots of your calls coming in as the Home Secretary is requiring police to patrol busy areas at peak times in a crackdown on antisocial behaviour. I know, mind-blowing idea. How did she ever think of that? I mean, they should be doing that already, and if they're not doing that already, that's down to a chief constable who's utterly incompetent and should be sacked on the spot. Surely? Is it just me? But particularly also want to hear from you on West Yorkshire Police. They've got a policy where candidates who are white can only apply in a certain period of time to become a police officer. If you, however, you're an ethnic minority, you can apply all year round, given extra support and help. Although, of course, it's not really racist at the end. They don't absolutely prioritise those candidates at the end, don't they? Really? Do you really think that's what's going on? I simply don't believe it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. And of course, calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate. Message is free on YouTube and free on X as well, of course. Particularly, as I said, I'd love to hear from you if you're a police officer, what you make of all of this. Please get in touch. Or if you've applied to the police, I'd love particularly to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. But phone lines open on all the big topics we're discussing, including, of course, that shock announcement from Donald Trump after he told everybody to, hey, just calm down, everything's fine. He was standing firm on his tariffs. Suddenly, he announced a 90-day pause on tariffs for all the countries that have not reciprocated. It's pretty much most of the countries in the world. It means that all of those countries go back down to the 10% base rate tariff, which the UK is already on. So we don't get a benefit from our tariff cut, but we do benefit from the rest of the world not going into a worldwide recession as a result of those tariffs. Mexico, Canada still have those 25% tariffs. We also still face those 25% steel and aluminium tariffs, but it is China which is getting the brunt of the problem. They have now seen their tariffs on US imports of Chinese goods going up to a whopping 125%. Where does this go next? But also, crucially, why do you think Donald Trump backed down? Was it all part of the plan, as his press secretary said, or did he actually realise that actually stock market was going down, bond prices were in free fall, and the small point of, cost of borrowing for the US debt had gone up? Love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. We're going to be talking to a man who was in a lot of the trade tariff conversations at the White House in the room a little bit later in the show. So do stay tuned for that at midday. Also, we're going to be talking about the cost of getting a passport to go abroad. Brits now face paying almost £100 to get a passport. Well, by the way, tens of thousands of illegal migrants cross the UK borders free of charge. Of course, they just throw their passports in the sea. But starting today, the price of a standard adult passport increases by £6 to £94.50. Plus, we're going to talk about the NHS. They're set to remove 300,000 people from hospital waiting lists. This is part of a clean-up aimed at eliminating unnecessary hospital appointments. But how do they know who those people are? And what about people who get accidentally removed from the list? A lot of incentive for hospitals to take people off the list and improve their figures. We'll talk about all that coming up. As I say, Benjamin Butterworth is with us. Talk about all of the big topics. Let's just talk briefly about the police story again, because we've spoken about that a lot in the last hour. What did you make of what our guest Nusrat Mithab said? She's a former Met Police superintendent, and she herself is from an ethnic minority, and she was arguing that this West Yorkshire policy, West Yorkshire police policy, basically allowing ethnic minority candidates to apply throughout the year, but she says they're not given, according to documentation supplied by this whistleblower to the Telegraph, not given priority at the final stage. But of course they will be. I mean, who are we kidding? If you're trying to improve your diversity, in quotes, which apparently is a good thing, we're told all the time, then you're going to be giving priority. But if you've got two candidates exactly the same, probably unlikely, but if they were exactly the same, you're gonna take the Asian or the black candidate over the white candidate, aren't you? I mean, if you take the point that she was making, which is that there are people that don't speak English from ethnic, religious minority communities, well then, by her argument, and with some logic, you'd have to hire a police officer who can liaise with those people in order to reach them. I just think, no.
And so,
my answer to that is, as I said, absolutely no. If you come to this country, you live in this country, and you don't speak English, it is not our job to hire officers who happen to have a background where they'll know that language. I think that is really, really wrong.
But the point she makes, if that's the problem they're trying to solve, well, then of course they're going to be giving preference.
But they're solving it the wrong way. The
problem
to be solved is that there are people living in this country who don't speak English and can't communicate.
Yeah, I mean, look, absolutely.
That's the problem.
The idea that people here don't speak English that have lived here for decades, it harms their lives, it harms their kids' lives, and often it's women who haven't been given the opportunity by their husbands, and so there's nothing liberal.
Oh, it's almost
about
like we're
allowing
importing
that.
some cultures that we don't really like. Funny that.
But I mean,
remember, everybody, diversity is our strength.
It's a valid question for a police force to say, well, we've got a lot of black people in this area, or a lot of Southeast Asian people. Why don't we have any police officers like that? It's perfectly valid.
But a lot of that is why don't they apply? But again, we also know in lots of areas where when a black police officer tells a black girl that he'll be called even worse names than a white police officer, called things like Oreo or coconut, blatantly racist terms. So you're doing the white man's job, and you're a traitor, and that's a horrible thing that happens to those officers. But again, there's an issue of trust, and I completely get why. And as I pointed out earlier, white people going, I don't know what the issue is. I don't care whether the officer is what colour skin his or her skin is. I don't, for instance, as a woman, I don't need to speak to a woman officer. I could understand in the case of rape or sexual assault, you would feel much more comfortable talking to a woman officer. I get that. But that's a very specific crime. But I just think it's really bizarre. I don't think that every public service, or indeed every job, needs to be representative of the community it deals with. If so, then why do we have something like only 4% of teachers at primary school being men? Why are we not worried about that? Why don't we insist that we have more men teaching kids? I mean, there's a massive issue with young boys who haven't got good role models.
I think more men as teachers might be a good thing.
More men as teachers would be a good thing, but we don't seem to have some policies that enable that to happen. We don't seem to think it's a crisis. I don't need everyone running, or half the people running a FTSE 100 company to be women. There are perfectly good and understandable reasons why women don't end up as CEOs of top FTSE 100 companies, largely because they're too sodding sane and they want to have a better work-life balance. No, I know, listen, I move in a world where I know a lot of women who've got top degrees, who've worked in these sort of businesses, they're earning silly money, they're really... And you know what? They would like to spend some time with their kids. It's as simple as that. And the men who are in those jobs don't spend any time with their kids either, same as the women who haven't got kids who are in those jobs. There are very, very good, understandable reasons why certain jobs tend to be done by certain people. There's a reason why, the bin men issue, why do we call them bin men and dinner ladies? Because they're largely men doing that job, largely women doing that job. There's a reason why different people do different jobs.
But then, I mean, that's true. And also, I think in both the male and female example there, you have, you know, women that don't have a workplace that's flexible enough and men that really should spend time with their kids. No, you can't be
flexible. You can't be flexible if you're a CEO of a major company. You need people who are in work, working, you know, a 20-hour day. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's how they're in their job. And most women are too sane to do that.
I mean, I think people that have a family life and a normal life are probably better at the job.
They might be, but they're not very good at that job, and their job is to be good at that job. No one cares about your family life.
The fact is, there are barriers to some people progressing in these careers. Of course, there are. You know, 50 years ago, the reason I imagine there were no female FTSE 100 CEOs wasn't because there were no women capable. It's because there were barriers.
Yeah, no, there was sexism. But again, do you think the world is horribly sexist and racist today? Do you think there are police forces that are not hiring police officers because they're black or Asian today, or because they're women? I don't think that is the case. But what I would worry now is there are people who are getting those jobs who perhaps aren't as good as some of the other candidates because they're being pushed because of what we call positive discrimination, which is just racism or sexism by any other name. And that undermines the ethnic minority officers, it undermines, say, the women officers or gay officers or anything. That undermines these people because people will go, I wonder how you got your job.
But I mean,
it's damaging to people.
There have been reports recently, so Charing Cross Police Station, one in central London, was found to be institutionally sexist, homophobic and racist based on actual things that were going on in the office. Now, when you've got a situation like that, can you imagine if you're a new officer from any of those groups, a woman or a black person, you're not going to feel safe, feel comfortable or content with your work life in that situation. And so it's right that they try and fix those problems.
But dealing with the wrong ones doesn't mean not employing white people.
No, but I don't think that's the conclusion either. I think trying to have a police force that looks like the community is beneficial, but the idea that that means blocking a candidate because he's a straight white man is ridiculous when we struggle to fill the ranks of police officers and we struggle to fill them with people that are competent and that enjoy it. You know, I've had experience with police officers that really don't seem the brightest sparks, and you say you know some that are bright sparks and they want to leave because it's not contenting. And so clearly if the police force dealt with that, they might have better retention.
Absolutely, that is all very fair. I'd love to hear your thoughts. As I say, if you're a police officer in particular, I'd love to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. Let's talk more about these tariffs. Look, we're going to be hit, even Keir Starmer admitted yesterday, we're going to be hit with this tariff war that's ongoing around the world now, as launched by Donald Trump, whether or not our economy is hit by tariffs itself or other countries are, because that could have the effects of a worldwide recession. Shock announcement yesterday, just 4 hours after Donald Trump had been talking about how, you know, everyone should calm down and just relax. It's all fine by Donald Trump. The White House has said he had a spine of steel that he will not break. Critics saying, well, he blinked first. And he did blink, there's no question at all. There was market turmoil, even he admitted it when he told reporters. He said people were getting a little bit yippy. Great word.
Yes.
A little bit yippy, he said, a little bit out of line. And basically, he paused the higher tariffs that came into force on Wednesday. These were up to, 80, 90% for some countries. The only country he didn't pause it for, well, of course, Mexico and Canada still face those 25% tariffs, and China faces now 125% tariffs. Everyone else in the world is now back down to 10%. That's where we were already. That was the default position. So we are still facing tariffs. That is still going to have an impact on British businesses and British jobs, and it's also we're going to see the impact of what's going on between China and America, the two biggest economies in the world. That trade war doesn't look like it's ending anytime soon. I don't think either Xi Jinping or Donald Trump are likely to want to back down in that battle. I could be wrong. Can happen today, who knows? But they've got to both be seen to have some sort of win, I think, for their own egos, that is going to impact the world no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, the Chinese ruler said yesterday that the Chinese economy is an ocean, and oceans have storms all the time. It won't really affect us. So he's suggesting that China will be okay. But of course, the reason that we all have plasma televisions and sofas and iPhones in our homes is because of the revolution of Chinese manufacturing that has made this affordable for 40 or 50 years. Exactly, yeah. Now, I actually think at the centre of this, there's a valid question, which is, can countries like the US and Britain and Europe, is it safe, is it secure that we rely on China and other countries like that, Bangladesh, to make everything? And when that comes to things like steel, our industry is about to go under in Scunthorpe. does that mean that we are vulnerable, that this is actually an irresponsible way to run an economy? I think that's a valid question.
There is an argument for protectionist tariffs for key industries. We were talking about the show in last few days, protect our agriculture and the like, because again, we saw what happened during lockdown and we saw what happened with the Ukraine war, that actually it's all very well having all this wonderful different, just-in-time economy, trading links, but actually when it all breaks down or prices surge and you haven't got, say, energy security or agricultural security or security in producing your own steel, or medicines, you're in a lot of trouble very quickly. By the way, we haven't already had these tariffs on pharmaceuticals. That's another area which the American president's looking at. We already have difficulty getting a lot of medication in this country. There are shortages all the time.
Well, one suggestion is that actually if the rest of the world wanted to retaliate, what about not honouring US patents? Because actually pharmaceuticals is a prime example where the whole world honours those patents.
Well, China doesn't honour anything
besides
like that.
China, and so actually if people really wanted a war on this, well, they would stop honouring Microsoft or pharmauticals, and then the US would be in trouble.
Yes, good luck with that. Or China could just call in all their debt. They've got trillions in US debt. But this is it. It's a house of cards. It's essentially a big Ponzi scheme. All this government debt that goes on for decades and decades. We can't bring down that house of cards on us because it's going to hurt all of us. That is a trouble. And we saw what happened with the 2008 crisis, following on from what happened in the 1930s as well. We know the damage it does. I mean, it costs people's lives. It's the same as, lockdown. Yeah, you know what? Turning off the economy for a best part of a year and a half, funnily enough, makes the country poorer. And when the country gets poorer, you know what? Public services get poorer, people die, health service can't function, you get into a lot of other issues. If you were Keir Starmer, what would you do right now?
I actually think he's playing it quite well, because
I do as well, actually.
I don't think you want to be too close to Donald Trump, because he always lashes out in the end, and you don't want to be picking a fight with him because that's what he
We
rebels
haven't had any special treatment. The whole world's on the same tariff now.
Yeah, and actually, we don't really have a disparity in our trade with the US, and so we shouldn't be a focus. I think just sort of patting him on the head and saying, aren't you a nice man, smiling nicely by the side is quite a sensible way to do it.
And wait for it to stop.
Yeah, exactly, because this is the thing. I feel like it was inevitable that these crazy tariffs weren't going to last, because the damage will be foremost on the US economy, and it's always the people at the bottom of the pile that see their jobs go first, and those are the ones that support Donald Trump. And
US farmers who apparently, again, things we've learnt this week, that the biggest, the two biggest trading economies in the world, America and America and China, and the biggest export from America to China is soy to feed pigs. And then we import all the pig meat.
I didn't know that.
I know exactly, but it's and soy is produced obviously by American farmers. Pretty much all to a man and woman voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
How's that working out for you?
But there's also this idea that America has had a hard deal, which is completely ridiculous. 50 years ago, the US was 25% of the world economy. Today, it's still 25%.
Now, even with all the growth and all the economies.
All the growth of everyone else. Nowhere else. Europe, Britain, nothing like what we were 50 years ago. The average income in America is $76,000. I don't know, it's probably about £65,000. A lot of Americans have done very well out of this. Poverty across the world is nothing like it was a generation ago. And so dismantling this system is dangerous.
Not a good idea. But also, crucially, this idea that, we're buying more from Cambodia or Vietnam than they're buying from us in America. Well, of course you are. You're richer and bigger. You're always going to have a trade deficit with those sort of countries. It's quite bizarre. Let's talk about something else before we go to a break, and I'm going to get out to your calls and say always call in on anything you want to talk about, including the tariffs. But this is the most glorious story. We'll talk about this a bit later as well. Hamas is, I kid you not, going to use the European Convention of Human Rights to challenge its prescription as a terrorist organisation in the UK. As you all know, it is a terror organisation that is running Gaza, and they are prescribed as a terrorist organisation because they are terrorists. It's really, really that simple. They claim in a 106-page legal application to the Home Secretary, they're appealing this designation of their organisation as terrorist. They claim the law breaches Hamas supporters' human rights as it unlawfully restricts their freedom of speech and their right to protest. You couldn't make this stuff up, except in Britain, where, of course, you could.
And Are these people that are putting this legal bid in, presumably they're in Britain in order to do it, right? In which case, are you not admitting to being part of a proscribed group, which is presently a criminal offence? It seems utterly absurd that you can even admit to being in a proscribed group. Look, you don't have a human right to be a terrorist. I feel like that doesn't need saying.
I think it does these days.
But maybe a court does need to say it.
I mean, for God's sake, don't tell the European Court, because I think they might think, oh, I think you do have a right to do that.
You know, I mean, it's patently absurd. And the idea that a human right to believe that you should wipe out Jewish people, a human right to believe that, you know, acts of bombing tube stations and things like have happened in the past, those aren't human rights. Those are evil. Those are terrorism.
And the right to support them. Yeah,
exactly.
It is a crime. But again, it would be nice, frankly, I think, that if a lot of these people were actually being arrested on our streets when they join these marches.
I actually think this court case is fantastic because we just take the names and then kick them all out because they're admitting to supporting terrorism.
I hate to tell you, an awful lot of them are legally allowed to be here, and some of them are born here. That's the really, really scary thing, but there we are. 11:21 is the time. Your thoughts on that? Welcome. 0344 499 1000. Lots of calls coming in on the police. We'll get to those up next. This is Talk.
Firstly, this has happened in 50 towns. So 5 local inquiries is going to potentially give partial answers to 5 of those towns, but what about the other 45? Secondly, local inquiries have no statutory basis, which means they can't compel witnesses and they can't compel evidence. So, of course, if you are a councillor or a council official who's been complicit in these horrible crimes and you can't be compelled to go to an inquiry, you're not going to go.
What a surprise,
Yeah, unbelievable.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you very much indeed for your company. 11:24 is the time. Delighted to say Benjamin Butterworth is still with us. Let's go straight to your calls. John is on the line and he's in Oxford. Hello, John.
Hi, how are you doing, Julia?
Very well indeed. What do you want to talk to us about?
Well, I'm ashamed to tell you that I'm leaving the country at the end of the year because, quite frankly, I've had enough of living in a namby-pamby state.
Where are you going?
I'm going to Tenerife.
What, to live? I mean, you're not one of those people who goes, if X gets elected, I'm leaving the country and doesn't it? You're planning, you're selling up, you're moving for good?
Yeah.
Wow. Let's face it. Let's be honest. You're going for the weather.
No, I'm not. I'm going because your house gets burgled You phone the police and they tell you, we'll come out when we're not so busy. Try and not touch anything. Yeah. And 11 days later, you still nobody's come out. You have your wallet stolen out of your bag. You get a notification on your phone that someone's trying to use your credit card within 11 minutes. In W.H. Smith's on CCTV, and the police say it's not a high enough value crime for us to investigate it.
Yeah, that's happened to a friend of mine. Exactly the same scenario. Yeah.
My sister was a teacher at an infant school, and she got a directive from Lancashire Education Authority not to touch any children, not to hug them, make any contact with them. If the child comes up to you, you tap them on the head with an open palm, twice on the head. And she said she cannot see little children crying.
No.
Because they're her children. They run into her and everything. She was absolutely devastated, heartbroken, and now she's a nervous wreck. Her health has deteriorated so much. She used to live for that job, and it breaks my heart to see it.
And again, this is all just like, and I know they're thinking, oh, well, you know, teachers being accused of abuse and things like that, you know, but a loving primary school teacher giving a kid a hug who's upset about something or fallen over, that's what we expect, that's what we want. That's the term, they're in loco parentis, they're supposed to act like parents and be loving to them.
And I got a letter from the work that I used to do, that I don't do anymore. I'm doing another job. I went into a place. This is honestly, I can send you the letter. I went in. I said, "Good morning. Now I'm a very old-fashioned chap. If I see a man and I don't know him, I call him sir."
Yeah, very polite.
Like a policeman. I was brought up. I don't call him Bob or something like what they're suggesting now. You call a policeman sir.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the subject. Now, I went into a place and I said, "Good morning, miss," because she was a young lady and everything. She said, "I'm not a miss. I'm very offended by your you addressing me this way." I said, "Well, what do you want me to call you?" She said, "I'm non-biased."
Oh, God.
This is in a high street sandwich, large sandwich chain. I won't say what it is. And she complained because I wear my my badge on my... on a linear thing, and she actually complained to my company, and I got a letter saying I have to be careful how I address people.
I mean, I'm sorry, miss. That's how I would refer to, you know, so a waitress or something. You know, excuse me, miss, or excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
That's really good. I love that American thing where they call everyone sir and ma'am. I love that. I think, and especially kids expected to address, you know, people like that. I love that. So again, I can understand. You're literally like, I'm done. I've had enough of this. Do you mind me asking what your job is? Can you actually work in Tenerife? Do they want you in Tenerife? There's another question.
Well, I'm actually gonna. We're getting a little cafe doing English afternoon tea. We're not going to open crazy hours. It's only something just to. I need structure to my day.
And tide things over.
Who I am.
Do you know what? I think a lot of people would understand. You're just feeling like this is just the world's gone mad. Or here's an alternative, though, John. Why not stay and fight for the sanity? If all the sane people leave, then we're left with the non-binary whingers.
Because you're classed as being racist if you say, well, why can't we look after our war heroes that are living on the street instead of people coming from Eritrea who are 22 years old?
Yep.
I get called a racist. So I just think, oh my goodness me.
Just not for me. Don't want to fight these battles. And John...
I'm going to end up physically fighting with people, and I'm a bit too old for that. So
I wonder. I'm assuming it's a bit less PC in Tenerife, but again, it's moved on from being polite. We used to have terrible sort of racism, sexism, and homophobia. Moved on from people being simply courteous and polite and right to just absurdity. I mean, you know me, I won't do people's preferred pronouns. I use people's correct pronouns, and the correct response to that non-binary, I imagine, blue-haired, nose-piercing girl would have been, "No, you're not. You're a woman, and miss is a perfectly appropriate thing to say," and that's the end of the matter. Because they need to be told. If they haven't got parents who tell them, they need us to tell them.
Well, as regards policemen as well about this West Yorkshire, I really don't care if you're blue, red, green, orange. orange.
Yep.
I really don't care. If you've got the best man for the job
or
the best woman for the job, give them the job.
Exactly. I know. John, well, look, we'll miss you. I hope you'll carry on listening. I'd rather you stayed here and fought the good fight. John, appreciate that. But Benjamin, I mean, there'll be a lot of people just feel that I just can't do it anymore. I can't fight these mad fights anymore. I refuse to give up. I want to fight for the sanity.
Yeah, my pronouns are pay me. That's the only thing I care about day to day, I have to be honest.
If someone says, use my preferred pronouns, what do you say? Because mine would be sod off.
Well, I would, yes, I would, because I want to be respectful. But
it's not being respectful.
I do think
if a man asks you to call him she or her, would you do it?
Yes, I would.
And that's respectful.
Yeah,
do you think that's respectful to women?
Well, I think it's respectful.
Because it's not respectful to me as a woman that you're calling a man my pronouns.
But I don't think it affects you if someone in a cafe says they identify that way.
Yeah, it does.
However, I would say that if you work in something like a cafe...
Get over yourself.
I think it's just not, especially if you don't look like what you're saying you are, well, then, of course, people aren't going to make that assumption. And so I think there's a line to be drawn.
Also, my God, if you're in that scenario, you're getting offended by that. Wow, your life's pretty good, isn't it? If that's the worst thing that ever happens to you in life. Let's go to another call though. Steve is in Blackpool. Steve, you're not planning to move to Tenerife as well, are you?
No, but I'm going to Malaga at the end of April.
Hey! Can we come with you? Benjamin's. Yeah. I tell you what, he's worse than me when it comes to travel. He's always abroad.
I do my best. I'm in Mexico in October as well, but we're not going there just yet.
Excellent. I'm loving your work. It's the only thing worth spending money on, if you ask me. I love my travel. What do you want to say, my love, about policing?
Community policing. I'm from the era, I'm 52 now, where we had a community copper who was on every day. I'm sure he had a day off, but I can never remember it as a child. His name was Gareth Jones, and he was the best thing we had in our council estate.
Yeah. So you'd know him. Would parents go up and talk to him and say, look, we've had a problem with him over there in number 32? Or
absolutely, but you dreaded Gareth Jones knocking on your door because you knew you were in trouble. You were getting a clip round the ear and a kick up the backside off him and then sent back to your mum for another one.
See, those were good days when they were allowed to do that. I mean, I don't want police brutality, but the old cuff round the ear wasn't a bad thing a lot of the time.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm perfectly fine. I'm normal. I don't break the law. I've got respect for the law. I've got respect for others, and I get on with my job.
That'll never catch on.
I know. Common sense. It's gone out the window, but yeah, Gareth was a fantastic copper.
Gareth, if you're listening, call in.
If he's still with us now, I dread to think how old he is now.
But isn't it interesting that you remember that and you remember his name and how significant that was? Steve, such a lovely call. Thank you very much. Enjoy your holes. Thank you. I might be joining you. Thanks very much indeed. Going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about, just the latest madness when it comes to cost of your passport and why only 5 people have been convicted of piloting migrant boats this whole year, when there seem to be an awful lot of them doing it. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, DAB+. On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:34 is the time. Very much appreciate you joining me. I'm delighted to be joined right now by Robert Bates, who's Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control, who's joined us in the studio. Thank you so much. Let's talk about two stories in particular. One is about how much it costs to leave the country in the UK these days, because passport prices have just gone up, haven't they?
Yes, hitting about £100 now. I think this is probably...
But almost. I mean, in fact, almost. It's £94.50.
Yeah, well, so, you know, it's still a big amount for individuals that are perhaps, you know, already having their budgets tight, their household income squeezed by cost of living and, you know, the tax hikes that we're now seeing as well. So it's another burden placed on the shoulders of the British taxpayer.
Well, this is, I mean, it is a huge cost, and especially for families, when you are, you know, you've got, if someone's got like 2 kids, the cost of you getting test passports. Also, because of these EU rules, we have got this situation where these, if you do the EU rule, I'm so sorry, they've got a problem with the microphones there. If we've got the EU, you have to have more than 6 months on your passport before you can actually. You can actually travel. That's part of the problem, isn't it? So you're having to have a passport renewed much sooner.
Yeah, there's a whole host of problems with the current system, and of course the reason why they're focusing on these at the moment is because they are saying that they need to install a bit more order into the passport system and into, you know, the exits and entry points. But unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case at the moment. Britain, since about 2020, has been claiming it's been doing exit checks, but you know, it's been very superficial.
They have no idea who's in the country and no idea who's out.
And that's why we have 1.2 million people allegedly in the country illegally, and that we don't actually count people out.
It's always blown my mind that we have to faff around with this going to passport control and the questions and the like. With Benjamin Butterworth, you were saying that last time we went through, they knew who you were.
They did. They recognised me, and they said, "Do you know one of my favourite journalists, Julia Hartley-Brewer?"
Yes.
And that's a true story.
Hello, if you're listening.
Gatwick.
Hello, Gatwick Border Control. But this is the thing. It's the fact that they don't really keep a record. They don't really know what's going on, and we're being charged with privilege. But of course, there are a lot of people who get very worried about their passport disappearing, because for a while there were a lot of long delays, weren't there? And it would be like 6 weeks, months sometimes. Remember, MPs were getting a priority passport link at one point. I think we had the boss of the passport office working sort of 300-mile drive away from the passport office, which is a bit of a giveaway.
Yeah, there's a lot of chaos after
it's got a lot better now. But basically, if you want to do the fast track service, so you could just turn up to your local passport office, you get an appointment. It's £222. £222, and that's even just like with the same photo, all your same details, just fill out a new form, and they're charging you 222 quid. What are you paying for?
Well, and it's hardly faff-free. I mean, a lot of people probably on the fast track will have experienced the kind of delays that come with that as well.
I remember, I paid for a certain number of days because we were going away, and again, it arrived sort of days after they said it was going to arrive, and I was absolutely panicking.
Yeah, by the time you've gone through that whole process, you really need that holiday, really. It's incredibly stressful.
Absolutely. Let's also talk about the people, though, who get to come here for free, who don't produce a passport because they conveniently leave it somewhere or throw it in the sea when they're on a migrant boat, and they of course come here for free, and then we pay for them, no doubt paying for their documentation. Oh, by the way, apparently we're all supposed to have ID cards now.
Yes, I think we're heading in that direction, aren't we?
That's what
Tony
40
Blair's
MPs
found the reason now to finally stop pushing his case, and one that probably will get quite a lot of public reception.
Just on that, because you've been very sensible on all this at the Centre for Migration Control, the idea that if we all had ID cards and digital ID cards, it would be great for us to access the NHS. I mean, no, you need to be able to get an appointment. They don't have a problem IDing us. They don't even ask whether you're here legally or allowed to use the health service. But the idea that that this will stop employers from employing illegal workers. If you're employing those people without checking their passport and their status already, you're already doing it because you want to work on the black market and pay them under the legal minimum wage anyway. So how is that going to work?
Well, exactly, and it'll just gum up. It'll make the more processes more bureaucratic. Getting a GP's appointment more hassle than it already is. It'll make everything more difficult for the average Brit rather than.
And what if you lose your card?
Well, exactly. Then you have to go through a similar process with the passport control, I'd imagine, as well.
Part of the fun.
There you go, back in the system.
Well, look, let's talk about those people who do come here illegally, because only 5 people in the last year have been convicted of piloting small boats across the English Channel, despite more than 6,000 migrants making the journey. So that's just since in the last few months. So we had at least 119 dinghies arrive from France in Britain in the past 3 months. We're getting more and more of them as the warm weather happens. We're getting more and more people on each of those boats because they've made it harder for the smugglers to get hold of those boats. But despite all those boats and well, Rishi Sunak was stopping the boats. Keir Starmer is smashing the gangs. I mean, haven't seen much evidence of that so far. Despite all of that, they do actually need someone to actually operate the engine and to steer. Often those people, I think, they only go a certain part of the way and then they head back. But only 5 people have actually been prosecuted for that. I mean, that's absurd.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is absurd. It's a really small number, and, you know, we've never been incredibly good at actually prosecuting those individuals that have been facilitating this. There's been very few convictions in this area. I think there was about 60 last year as well, so it's hardly been something
in the whole year.
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about the number of people that would be prepared to be getting involved in this trade, the hundreds, if not thousands of people that will be stepping up to the plate for every one person that is convicted, you realise really that they are trying to push water uphill by smashing the gangs, because it's something that if you don't stem the flow of migrants coming across Europe, trying to cross the channel, then you will do absolutely nothing to deter those individuals.
Well, I mean, I'd always thought there'd be a lot of these, you know, the people who pay to get on these boats. Someone's told, like, you know, put the engine on, off you go. And then we'd seen reports that they just sort of hop off part of the way. They get them out into the water and say, right, hold this stick, keep the motor on, keep heading that way, and in about 5 miles, the British Navy is going to pick you up and you'll be fine. Yeah,
I think there is a case of some individuals occasionally either getting a bit of a sweetener to do it, some sort of asylum seekers getting the opportunity to maybe get a bit of a discount or being coerced into doing it as well. But a lot of the time it is individuals that are hooked in the gang network as well, and, you know, not really being caught as a result.
We did have that wonderful story earlier in the week about and it was just extraordinary, it was in the Sun newspaper, about that gate that had been put up, that barrier. It looked like a barrier to a car park, 2 posts, a barrier that goes up and down that was supposed to stop people smugglers getting the boats onto the beach, carrying the vans of life jackets. Nice of them to give them life jackets these days, eh? But bizarrely, it's open all day, only closed at night. Oh, and also surrounded by open, flat, green fields. So all you'd need is like a vaguely 4x4 style car, and you could just simply drive around the fence. And of course, British taxpayers' money would have gone towards that, because we give best part of £500 million to the French to help deal with this. And that apparently is, they've got 2 of these. That apparently is how they're going to do it.
Well, yeah, you know, money well spent as always. And of course, the French have been incredibly unhelpful. We hear stories in the last couple of weeks of the French effectively telling asylum seekers on the dinghies, you know, go out, go for about 10-15 minutes. The Brits will come along and pick you up as well. We need to get far tougher with the French. And we need to remember that actually there have been instances where British vessels have entered French waters to pick up vessels that have turned over and taken them back to French land as well. So it's not, you know, out of the ordinary or out of the no precedent that we shouldn't be able to, you know, if the French are playing silly gits, then we shouldn't be able to play silly gits.
Well, I mean, extraordinary is a report today that a British fisherman, Matt Coker, said he's heard radio transmission between British and French authorities about giving life jackets. It's the French giving them life jackets now, because so many of them not getting in the boats with life jackets. They're trying to avoid another tragedy, but they give them life jackets, and then they ask for the life jackets back off the British ones when they pick them up, and then a transfer is made. I mean, we're just facilitating. I don't want people to be dying on those boats, but they're just sort of making it easier for people, aren't they?
No, absolutely. And I think the important thing in the article that you just discussed is the fact that we are seeing more people put onto these boats as well, and that is because the demand has not abated at all. Yes, we might be making things slightly more difficult for the people smugglers, putting a bit of grit in the ointment, but we're not really doing anything to stem those flows. And that's why when the Labour Party came in and they decided to scrap all semblance of a deterrent, they really effectively bound themselves to a policy that is doomed to fail, because if you don't do anything that would persuade individuals looking to cross the channel that it's not worth their while and that they won't get asylum.
And here's why they think it is worth their while. They know they've got a very good chance of getting here, and once they're here, the odds are they're going to be allowed to stay. The latest absurd reason given why someone shouldn't be deported. A convicted cannabis dealer, Greek migrant Sally Dragody, who's 26, has been allowed to stay in the country after a judge ruled that his removal would breach his human rights, despite objections from the Home Office. Nice of the Home Office to object. The reason they object is he said he'd only committed the crime because he ran out of money during the COVID pandemic. So that was okay.
Well, yeah, well, that's their interpretation of what OK is, and I think that's probably the interpretation, fortunately, of what a lot of immigration tribunal judges would deem is an OK reason for someone to stay. If you ran out of money,
you're allowed to just go and commit a crime. That's fine, you can stay here.
Well, and it's hard to actually decipher what human right is being breached by returning this individual to Greece. Greece, as far as I'm concerned, isn't a war-torn country.
Again, another of the many countries we all try and get to ourselves.
Well, exactly. Well, if we can get a passport. But yeah, this isn't an individual that's fleeing a war-torn hellhole. He's not going to face persecution deportation if he's returned. He's effectively come into the country. He's been able to be given semi-settled status under the EU settlement scheme, which was a system introduced by Theresa May, riddled with problems that we're now starting to see the effects on. And as a result of that kind of status that he was given, you know, the judges have clearly said, well, in the balance of things, we're in favour of him staying in the country. It's an extraordinary decision, but, you know, it's one in a long line of them at this point. I think people are starting to get headaches with sheer frustration and anger.
It is actually laughable, isn't it, Robert? It really is. Benjamin Butterworth, listening to all of this, look, you know, you're on the left, even you must accept that the way the human rights legislation is being allowed to use to allow criminals to not be deported is now, you know, from Albanians and chicken nuggets and you name it, a paedophile whose children would lose out by not being with him. I mean, really, after he's a paedophile rapist? I don't think so. These are absurd cases. They make a mockery of this.
They do make a mockery of it, and they make a mockery of actual human rights, which clearly are important to protect. You know, and many of these, as you talked about Greece, many of these cases do not relate to horrific countries where maybe the consequence would be disproportionate. When you talk about Albania or Greece or Central Europe, these are nice countries where we go on holiday.
But even if someone's come from a very nasty country where you can understand they'd want to leave, well, here's the thing. If you come from somewhere really horrible and you're now living somewhere nice, maybe don't commit serious crimes and you won't be sent back there. I would have thought that would be a really big incentive for people, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I don't understand why the assumption is that they can stay unless there's some kind of extreme reason to send them back. It should be the reverse.
Robert, do you think that fundamentally we're going to have to leave the human rights legislation full stop? Otherwise, this madness is going to continue.
Yeah, I think you know, most of the British public have realised that for quite a while now.
I mean, even Hamas are trying to use the European Convention on Human Rights to stop themselves being sort of designated a terrorist organisation today because they claim it imposes on their rights of free speech. I mean, this is mad.
It's a plaything for the worst and most nefarious, and I think there's a part of the kind of intellectual lawyer worldview that quite enjoys the kind of
the little game.
How far can we push it?
Well, it's all an Oxford Union debate for them, isn't it? As opposed to the real world of living and people having to live among
they're
people.
They're not there in the communities having to see the uptick in crime.
Absolutely. Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming in. Robert Bates, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up next, we are going to be talking about NHS waiting lists. Will you be one of the 300,000 people who are bumped off a waiting list for the hospital appointment because apparently you don't really need it? We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Firstly, this has happened in 50 towns. So 5 local inquiries is going to potentially give partial answers to 5 of those towns, but what about the other 45? Secondly, local inquiries have no statutory basis, which means they can't compel witnesses and they can't compel evidence. So, of course, if you are a councillor or a council official who's been complicit in these horrible crimes and you can't be compelled to go to an inquiry, you're not going to go.
What a surprise,
Yeah, unbelievable.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:49 is the time. Right, have you got a hospital appointment coming up? And do you know whether or not you're still going to be on that waiting list to get that hospital appointment? Because the NHS is planning to remove 300,000 people from hospital waiting lists as part of a clean-up to scrap pointless appointments. Well, let's talk about this with Dr. Tony O'Sullivan. He's co-chair of Keep Our NHS Public and joins us now. Good morning to you, Tony.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. So, who are these people who've got appointments and they're on a waiting list who don't actually need them?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure if the NHS will know that without a huge amount of work. They're supposed to be getting funding in order to make sure that they do this correctly. But
why do they need funding to do this correctly? I'm trying to work out who might these people be, because they're saying patients with common conditions like bad backs or cataracts will be contacted and directed for treatment at community services like GPs, physios, instead of waiting for a hospital checkup. But presumably they've been given the hospital checkup because they thought they needed it.
Yeah. Well, I would be with you in questioning the sensible nature of this without a lot more thought. I mean, what are the substantial reasons for 6.3 million people waiting for 7.4 million appointments? And it's not just because less than 5% of that total are unnecessary referrals.
Yeah.
And of course, it's a judgment call. And of course, you know, your mother's a GP. If a GP makes a referral to the hospital, was a GP. If a referral makes if a GP makes a referral to the hospital, presumably they have good reason to do that.
They expect to do it. I mean, there are some sort of follow-up appointments. I know people who've had operations and you get a follow-up appointment. They go, so how's it going? Is everything fine? They go, yeah. They go, okay, thanks very much. Well, that's a waste of everyone's time. It'd be much better if that could be a follow-up phone call or a follow-up email. I mean, there might be some patients you're a bit worried about, so you're making sure, we don't want to see that person actually in the hospital. I'm very happy for all of my appointments with any medical, unless necessary, to be on the phone or by email. Let's just do it quickly and efficiently. But there are different patients who have different needs and different problems. But it seems to be my worry about this is there is going to be a massive incentive for hospitals to say, oh, let's try and get some more people off our waiting list because it will make our waiting list good. We look good. We already know we've got a problem in, say, A&E, where once someone is waiting way longer, for a hospital bed than they should do, and they've already messed up their waiting list records, then frankly they go to the bottom of the list, whereas all the people who are sort of just within the 4 hours of being seen, they will get seen 3 hours and 55 minutes, and they kind of massage those figures that way. Wasn't there going to be an incentive on the hospitals to shove more people off those lists who probably did need an appointment?
I think there is. There's a kind of carrot and stick policy which can be very counterproductive. And of course, if GPs get the numbers that they need, and if there are community physios and community nurses, then better care in the community will be celebrated by everybody, and more efficiency. Who would argue against more efficiency? I myself have had an operation, and I never saw the doctor again. I never saw a doctor again. It was all either telephone consultation or email, and that was absolutely fine for me. I'm IT literate. I got email. Yeah. I've got an internet that works most of the time. I hope. And I've got the technology to do that. But in one survey, the National Literacy Association said that 6.6 million people have very poor literacy levels. Yeah. And I know from my own work in the past in disability, if you include poverty, literacy, mental health problems, sensory impairment, physical disability, learning difficulty, perhaps 30% of the population are disadvantaged if you rely on self-referral or apps and so on. Yeah, and
that is a real issue. They just can't navigate it, and they just don't. Well, also again, we have one of the biggest issues with hospital appointments is people don't make them. They don't. They might miss them. People tell them off for that. Often, they've been sent a letter ages ago. They don't live a very organised life, or they've got to work. A lot of the issue often is people they're they're doing day rate work. If they don't turn up for work on that day, they've been assigned an appointment, they can't turn up. Can I ask you, though, about this another story that's in the news, and this is according to the papers, that the NHS is going to get its own Royal Mail postage class so that letters about appointments are not arriving late. I've certainly had an appointment that was given to me for a date before which the letter had actually arrived. But it's a new barcode system, so it will automatically identify, separate and process NHS letters, giving them a priority. I would argue part of the problem is that the NHS uses too many letters rather than, the amount of times I've given my email detail on my phone and said, can you please use my email? The amount of times I'll still then get a follow-up letter. It costs money, it's very slow, it's very inefficient, it often has a number to contact which no one ever answers, rather than just doing things by email electronically, which would work for the vast majority of people in this country, if not all, but the vast majority.
Well, I think that the good administration of the health service has a long way to go, and in there I would say, I know you disagree with this, I would say you need good management, you need good secretarial and admin support, and those kind of systems can be put in place where those people that can be contacted by email are contacted in that way, or reminded by text message. But the considerable numbers of people that are vulnerable to that method will have efficient communications by post. But the other important thing I wanted to mention, if you've got time, Julia, was the example of cataract surgery as an easy way of diverting patients from the hospital to the community. And I would have real worries about that.
Yeah,
because
it's a serious operation.
Well, it is. And the experience of the last 5 years has shown that diversion to a pathway that is from the local high street optician, of course, most of whom are really, really good, but their ability to refer directly to the private conveyor belt cataract surgery operatives mean that the amount of cataract surgery has gone up from 400,000 a year to 600,000 a year in the last 5 years. And in that same time, vision weights have not gone down from the NHS waiting list. They're still about 9% of the total. And the Royal College of Ophthalmologists are really worried that the explosion of supposedly simple cataract surgery by 50% has meant that the funding for that has been diverted to that pathway from NHS.
So that's an issue. That's something to look into. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Dr. Tony O'Sullivan, co-chair of Keep Our NHS Public. I want to get to a quick call on this, actually. I was going to go to Benjamin, but Deborah's on the line. She's called up on 0344 499 1000 on the NHS waiting list. Deborah is in Nottingham. What do you want to say?
Hi.
Hello.
My mum is, she suffers from osteoporosis, and she managed to have an MRI scan, which took quite a while.
Yeah.
And she's basically got a broken back.
Oh, God.
She's now they said that she'll be lucky to get in for 8 months.
I was going to say, well done, 8 weeks, yeah.
Even to see somebody.
That's not for an operation, that's to see a consultant.
That's to see somebody.
Wow.
So anyway, they said, well, what we'll do is we'll send you to a physio. And she says, I'm in so much pain, I couldn't do anything anyway with the physio.
But physio can help with the pain, though, depending on what the problem is.
Not with a broken back, I wouldn't.
Well, again, I was wondering whether you mean that figuratively or if they wouldn't send her to a physio if it was broken back, surely, because they'd need to mend the broken back.
Well, they have. Anyway, she got an appointment, and she thought, oh, crikey, this is really good. And she waited in all day for the appointment from the physio. It was an online appointment.
How does that work?
Phone.
That's mad.
Well,
yeah, okay. Yeah, quickly, yeah.
So she waited in all day. Nobody called.
Of course not.
So she tried to call them. Took her 2 days to get through.
Yep.
She spoke to somebody, and basically they said, oh, well, this is a ghost appointment. And she says, well, what do you mean? I don't know what a ghost appointment is. And basically, that's what it is. It's not an appointment. And they said, basically, you'll hear in hopefully 8 weeks to see to get.
It's just a sort of a pretend appointment so they can tick you off the list, but you don't really get one. That is genuinely terrifying. Honestly, there's so much cooking of the books that's going on and wasting of everyone's time. That is awful, Deborah. I'm so sorry about that. Sorry, I had to hurry a little bit because you can hear the music is starting. We're right up to the top of the hour, and I have to hit that target. Coming up next, we are going to be talking to Rick Gates. So he's going to be talking to us about Donald Trump and those tariffs. He's been in the room with tariff conversations in the White House. So why did Donald Trump decide to go back on his tariffs for most of the world, but not China? The EU, by the way, has just paused their tariff countermeasures. That's all coming up. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. Really appreciate you joining me. This is Talk, the home of common sense. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is great to have your company as always. Also great to be joined by journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, still with me. We've locked the door, kept him in. Good afternoon to you.
Good morning.
Thanks. Good morning. No, morning. Afternoon.
Oh, no, good afternoon.
Yeah, you know, he's on the left, so it's probably morning to him. Just I did that. When I moved to the breakfast show, genuinely, I think they actually had a jar like to put, a £1 fine in every time I said good morning, welcome back to the breakfast show. Right, coming up in this hour, we are going to be talking more about those tariffs and a lot of developments in the last 24 hours. Donald Trump said, everything is fine, everyone stay calm. And then he said everyone was getting a bit yippy. Not a word I'd heard before, yippy. He announced a 90-day pause on tariffs for most countries and did not respond with reciprocal measures. So people like us, but there's still a basic tariff, a baseline tariff of 10% on every country around the world, pretty much. That includes us. So we didn't get any benefit from yesterday's announcements related specifically to our exports to the US. They're still facing that whopping. It is a big whopping 10% tariff. May not have been as high as the EU, which had 20%. Now the EU itself, they've decided to pause their reciprocal tariff on America, Levi jeans and the like. They were going to tariff in return for that. The talks will be taking place. Mexico, Canada still facing 25% tariffs. There is still that 25% tariff on aluminium and steel imports to the US. But crucially, it is China who's bearing the brunt of those tariffs. Chinese goods entering America now facing up to 125% tariffs after retaliation. The ramping up, the ratcheting up of those tariffs. That is going to have a major impact. Doesn't matter what you Dubai or where you live, if the two biggest world economies are having a tariff war, we are all going to be suffering from that. Well, up next, we're going to be talking to a man who's been in the room when those debates over tariffs have been taking place in the White House. We're also going to be talking more about Hamas. They are trying to use, this is so laughable, you couldn't make up anything this stupid. They're trying to use the European Convention on Human Rights to challenge their classification as a terrorist organisation in the UK. I kid you not. British lawyers acting on their behalf say this is unlawfully restricting the freedom of speech and the right to protest for their terrorist supporters. I know, that's actually a real thing. Meanwhile, the latest Wokeism, the world's largest British parliamentary debate competition for school kids, organised by the Oxford Union, is pressurising teenagers as young as 14 to have to declare their gender pronouns at the start of each round, with non-compliance risking immediate disqualification. Seriously, kids, refuse to do it, be disqualified, you'll be heroes to the rest of us. But that's all coming up, plenty more besides. Get some more of your calls as well. Do get in touch. Ask you to get in touch on any of the topics we're talking about. You want to talk about the tariffs, want to talk about the hospital waiting list. We just had a really interesting call on that. Or also particularly what we've been talking about for the whole show, and that's the Home Secretary requiring police to patrol busy areas at peak times in a crackdown on antisocial behaviour. If there's any Chief Constable who's not having officers patrolling busy areas at peak times, he or she should be sacked on the spot, shouldn't they? Isn't that basic? This is so basic, or it's just a load of nonsense because it's already happening. Also, West Yorkshire Police basically giving priority to non-white candidates. Ethnic minority candidates being able to apply all year round, non-white candidates, white candidates having to wait until just a particular open period to make those applications. But of course, no priority given to ethnic minority candidates. Yeah, rubbish. Of course they are. They're just not saying the quiet bit out loud. This is racism, pure and simple. Give us a call on all of those topics. 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text messages cost one standard network rate message. It's free to message us on X, and of course free to leave a message on YouTube as well. Benjamin Butterworth, let's just come back to you quickly before we go to our next guest. Let's come back to the tariffs, because in terms of this sudden sort of massive U-turn by Donald Trump, do you believe this was him just sort of like, it's all part of the cunning plan of what he was going to do, Mr. Disruptor, or do you think that he was reacting to the markets in turmoil?
I don't think he has a plan. I think that's blatantly obvious. But I think the reality is that if the US economy slumps, then Republicans in Congress, which could overrule all of this if they wanted to, will stop supporting him. You have those midterm elections. He could lose a lot of power. And that is the reality. And it was hitting hardest those states that supported Donald Trump. The EU has just dropped its reciprocal tariffs, but they had designed them to affect those states where they voted for Donald Trump. So they were really trying to make that hurt.
Manufacturing states that wants it,
Now, I don't think that's why he changed his mind, but in general, that reality does come home to roost. He acts like the laws of gravity don't apply to him, but eventually they will.
They do, indeed. Well, let's talk to a man who's been in the White House. He's been at meetings where the tariff policy has been discussed. He's been in the room. That's Rick Gates. He joins us once again. He's former deputy campaign manager for Donald Trump back in 2016. Very, very good afternoon to you, Rick.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Well, what do you think happened between Donald Trump basically telling everyone to calm down and everything was fine, and the White House press spokespeople saying that he had a spine of steel that will not break, to suddenly him announcing that people were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit out of line, and then pausing those tariffs for 90 days for the most countries in the world?
Yeah, look, I think there's a number of factors that are moving the tariff discussion. A lot of people internationally aren't paying attention to our budget process, which is ongoing right now between the House and the Senate. And that does play a role in these tariffs. If Trump does not get his tax cuts through, it makes the tariffs much more difficult. And he needs those Republican votes to make sure that happens. That is happening. That happened yesterday. It's going on today. So I think when you look at the tariffs, he did achieve what he wanted to do. He's got now over 75 countries over the next 90 days that they're going to be negotiating tariff deals with.
Wouldn't they have done that anyway? Even with the threat of the tariffs, without actually, even if he said they're going to come on in 90 days' time or in a month's time, he didn't actually have to impose them from the immediate moment. I'm pretty sure that most of those countries would have come to the table with the US at any point anyway.
Perhaps, but this makes them come a lot faster, and it comes with a lot of leverage on Donald Trump's side. You've already seen countries like Israel negotiate, drop those tariffs. That's a good indication. Absolutely, there are other factors. The bond market probably had something to do with it in terms of the longevity of how long this could play out. So I think, to identify and say there's one factor or Trump buckled, I disagree with that characterization. I think that there are a lot of dots that are involved in this, and to connect those is very complex. And you need to pay attention to, multiple aspects of the tariff arguments, the budget debates going on, and other issues that are impacting the global economies to see. We also had the largest stock market increase yesterday, right? Now, that wipes out the 3 days of losses last week. But again, this is an evolving process. It's a 90-day pause. It doesn't mean he's eliminated all the tariffs yet.
No, well, again, we know we've got 10% tariffs on us and others, and again, we're supposed to be, big friend of the United States. We're now lumped in with anyone and everyone in the rest of the world. I mean, Canada and probably Mexico probably thought they were friends of the United States, and they're facing even higher tariffs at 25%. Do you think his change of mind has anything to do with the fact that he would have seen the boss of JP Morgan on Fox News Business talking about how there was a high chance of recession in the US, and watching the stock market go down, but also seeing the price of American debt, servicing American debt, going up in the bond markets as well, that actually it was a bit, so phrase here we have here, squeaky bum time for the American economy, and enough people got in the room with Donald Trump to basically shake him back to his senses?
No, look, there's many advisors that wanted to keep pressing on with these tariffs, as there were advisors telling them, hey, maybe let's put a pause on this. I don't think President Trump really cares what Jamie Dimon thinks. Jamie Dimon certainly, was out of step with him along the campaign trail, and it didn't really have an impact. So I think, again, what you have to look at is it's a bigger process. It's an evolving process. It's not over by any stretch. There's a lot more to come, and I think we'll have to wait to see how other markets, you just mentioned the EU, has now stopped its retaliatory tariffs. Maybe they'll come to the table, maybe they won't. China, as you see, is facing the brunt of it, and that is a concern, I think a continuing concern for a lot of countries, because that is not resolved yet, and that's a great indication that President Trump is willing to press on if he believes that's the right path.
Well, you say China is bearing the brunt of it, but actually it's US consumers bearing the brunt of it, because ultimately either China won't ship those cheap goods to US, or they'll ship them, they'll be much more expensive. And it's US consumers who'll be paying more or can't get hold of the goods they want to buy more. The idea that those goods are just suddenly going to be manufactured in America, given higher labour costs in America, even allowing for those tariffs, or that they're going to be able to move that quickly, is, and given also we don't know whether the tariffs are going to be there tomorrow or next year or any time. That's for the birds. So it's not China bearing the brunt. It's American consumers bearing the brunt.
If they ultimately buy Chinese products, but this is the whole goal. They could source them from other countries. We could also look at manufacturing. Manufacturing is going to take time. There's no question about it. It's not going to happen tomorrow. But that is the goal of these policies, is to move manufacturing back to the U.S. There are many Americans that are willing to sacrifice for a period of time. Nobody knows how long that is.
They may be, but 70% of all goods sold on Amazon alone are produced in China, and the next 20% are actually they're component parts that go into goods. So even goods that are sold as American goods by American brands have a huge amount of Chinese imports in them. So even those homegrown, home manufactured goods in America will also cost more, or they won't be able to get those parts. Now, we saw what happened in the wake of lockdown when we had that really massive difficulty in just sourcing some things. You just simply couldn't buy some things for months on end. That's going to be impacting the American consumer as well, isn't it? At the end of the day, an awful lot of these people who were promised an improvement in the standard of living, some tax cuts, they're going to be living with higher costs, and they're going to be living with higher taxes, because ultimately this tariff is a tax and it's passed on to consumers.
Yeah, but the design is to be short term. So yes, there's going to be pain in the short term, but there's a payoff in the end, and the longer term gain is what President Trump is trying to get to. That is the whole design of this effort.
Now that's the thing. That's the bit that doesn't make sense to me. And this is where we've had these ideas. This is what's going to happen. We're going to bring onshoring of manufacturing back to the US. Now, look, I completely understand that. We all know, in the free market, great cheap goods, but it does mean an awful lot of people are buying cheap goods, but are losing their own job as their job is shipped off to Mexico or to China or a call centre in India or whatever. I completely and utterly understand that. However, there are lots of reasons why companies manufacture in countries with not just cheap labour but lower regulation, lower standards and the like, because it has a massive impact on the bottom line. But I don't understand how these tariffs can both, A, produce huge amounts of revenue for the United States government to help pay off the multi-trillion-pound debt, and at the same time, B, force companies to the table so that they will lower their tariffs, and then in return the US will lower their tariffs, and so we can just get back to more free trade. And also C, maintain high tariff barriers and force manufacturers to move their manufacturing to the US, particularly to those swing states that went for Donald Trump, and bring those jobs back to America. I don't see how you can do even one of those three things at the same time, let alone all three.
Well, let's take them out. Your point C, it's already being done. Major corporations are moving manufacturing back to the U.S. Again, it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to take time. You have Nike, you have Apple, you have a number of companies that have already said they're going to commit to manufacturing in the U.S. That's part of the negotiation.
They'll be using cheap Chinese components.
No, not necessarily. They're looking for other ways to source. There are other countries that source some of those products. That's exactly what they're doing. Look, this is the whole point. It's forcing us to do this. It's forcing us to look to other places in China. It's forcing us to look at manufacturing in the U.S. There was a lot of criticism, as you identified in COVID, when the U.S. couldn't source products except from China. Yeah. It made us look weak. It perceived a weakness on our own part. You know, Scott Bessent, I think said it best. We have got to be stop being an exporter of services and be a manufacturer of goods and services. Yeah. And that's exactly what President Trump is trying to do. It's gonna take time, and it's gonna be an evolving process.
Yeah. But one of the things that Donald Trump keeps saying is how, you know, America's been exploited and it's terrible. They've got these trade deficits with a lot of these countries. But there is no conceivable point until the end of time when Cambodia or Vietnam or other small countries are going to be net importers of American goods as opposed to net exporters to America. They are smaller, poorer countries, smaller populations, less money. Of course, America is going to be importing more from those countries. So even sort of the ideological basis of it doesn't make sense.
Well, sure, I think it does. I mean, if you look again at the bigger picture, you're trying to get to a trade deficit neutral position, and the U.S. is not anywhere near there. So any negotiating tactic, any leverage point that Donald Trump has, he's going to use. You're absolutely right. We may not get absolutely to zero, but we're going to get much closer than we are right now, and that's an advantage.
I can understand when you're dealing with other developed first world economies like the EU, got similar, for instance, you know, labour costs and the like, and regulation, but you're not going to get to parity in terms of trade with poorer countries selling you cheap goods, which, by the way, US consumers want to buy.
Yeah, again, we are going to look as a country, we're going to look for other places to source those goods if we have to. Other countries are going to come to the table. There's already been offers on certain products, certain assets that the U.S. can get from other places. Again, it's not going to happen in a day or a week. Everybody is expecting that, you know, President Trump makes the announcement, then it's going to snap at his fingers. It's going to be done. Mm-hmm. It's evolving. It's going to take time. There are multiple layers to it, but it is moving in that direction. You're right. We may not get all the way there, but we're certainly going to get much closer than we are now, and that is part of the goal.
I mean, you categorically will not get with a lot of those countries. In terms of the goal and where we get there, where are we with China? I mean, there are understandable reasons to put tariffs on Chinese goods, particularly the mass state support for, you know, steel industry and the like, which means that no one else can even remotely compete with the prices that they can sell it. And there's a deliberate Chinese policy in lots of cases of buying up a lot of resources, manufacturing, and then dumping it on a market, basically effectively, you know, ruining other economies, industries in this area. There's an argument for that. It's a very different market, and it's actually often very economically hostile in that way. Well, where does this end? Because I can't see neither Donald Trump nor Xi Jinping being men who are willing to sort of back down and ever look like they've taken a defeat. How do we come to something that we can somehow claim as a win for both sides?
Well, I think cooler heads will prevail. I think it has definitely escalated. I think it may continue to escalate, over the next few days until there is a breaking point. Unlike 2016, 2017, when Donald Trump introduced tariffs to China and China basically accepted the majority of them, it's a much different story this time. I don't think they're having the same posture, but I also think that they are worried that their economy is fragile right now, too. And I think both the U.S. and China recognizes that our economies are dependent, codependent on each other. And so the question is, how far will it escalate? But more importantly, how long will that escalation continue? If they escalate another couple of days and then they come to their senses, then I think, things could, come back the other way and it might be calmer markets. But I think that China has got to be concerned too, because the more they push on these retaliatory tariffs, the more they put their economy in jeopardy. And this is becoming whose economy is stronger. I'm sure I know where Donald Trump is going to stand on that. He's going to say the U.S., and I'm sure President Xi Jinping is going to say the same thing. So where is the point that they come to the table and say, okay, enough is enough. Let's start negotiating.
But as you say, they are completely interdependent. I mean, the U.S. economy and American and Chinese economy almost couldn't survive in the same level, in the same way. So, in terms of the driving force for Donald Trump, is it what's happening to the man or the woman on Main Street that matters most rather than Wall Street? And actually, it's about what their dollar in their pocket. Because at the end of the day, all the other issues that came up at the last presidential election in November were actually dwarfed by the concern that people have for the cost of living. Even the immigration issue, it's about cheap labour coming into cultural issues as well, and criminality, but it's cheap labour coming into the country, undercutting working class jobs. That's still part of the cost of living. At the end of the day, if people feel poorer, they're going to be very disillusioned with Donald Trump and the Republicans very, very quickly, aren't they?
Yeah, look, if you look at what's going on domestically here in the U.S., the press has really moved off immigration. It's still being covered, but the economy is front and center. And President Trump and the Republicans know full well that if they don't deliver on some of those economic promises, it's going to be painful in this midterm cycle. And then that gives the president basically a 2-year cycle instead of a 4-year cycle, because he'll lose the ability to use the House as a way to push his policies. So they're very keenly aware of that. They're being very careful. That's why our budget process playing out right now is so important. Getting those permanent tax cuts through that bill is going to be extremely important. If that does not happen, that's going to put the tariffs in jeopardy, and that's going to put Main Street in a very bad position, and that means voters are going to take it out on him in November.
Well, given that we are all being affected by this international trade war, even at 10% or 125%, fears of worldwide recession impact all of us in the UK and elsewhere. I'm very pleased that Rick Gates is in the room, giving us some calm voiced thoughts of reason in the room. Thank you so much for joining us, Rick Gates. He's former deputy campaign manager for Donald Trump back in 2016, still involved in the White House now. Benjamin Butterworth, it is fascinating because we've told again, I mean, Donald Trump changes his tune every day, but again and again, people who support him trotting out these ideas about we're going to achieve this, and this, all of which are completely mutually exclusive.
Yeah, I mean, that guy, to be deputy campaign manager of a successful presidential campaign, must be very bright. And yet Donald Trump has people as clever as him jumping through hoops that clearly don't make sense. Yeah. Vietnam said to the US a couple of days ago, all right, we'll drop all tariffs. Yep. Then the reciprocal will be zero, right? And the White House said, no, that's not enough.
What parity. Can we do? Yeah.
OK, the average Vietnamese person earns $4,000 a year. The average American earns $76,000 a year. There's never going to be parity. And actually, there's a valid question to say, is it a good job to have people in America making very cheap T-shirts, for example? Yeah. Is that actually a profitable job, a rational way to run your economy?
They'll have to run an awful lot less to do. But also, Americans aren't willing to pay those prices.
Exactly. And if it's about jobs, well, maybe manufacturing jobs in the medium term, some of them will go back to the US. But in the immediate term, a lot of jobs will be lost by every company that suddenly got a $100,000 tax bill for every $100,000 of imports.
Yeah. It's really that simple. I mean, again, the people who are defending Donald Trump on this, and again, it's not, I've said it before, I will say it for a millionth time, it is not Trump derangement syndrome to say that this is a dumb policy. It really isn't. And the idea that always got people to the table, the idea that America can't bring any country to the table with a flick of their fingers if they insist. They can threaten things, even if they want to threaten things. But again, as you say, so many of the things they announce, you can't, they put tariffs on countries which they already have a free trade deal. It is absurd. A lot of the aims are impossible or mutually exclusive with the other aims they've stated. It does not make sense to me. And we are all going to be poorer as a result. We are all, including Americans, and Brits are going to be poor as a result of all this. It's absolute madness, if you ask me. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. Calls coming in, particularly talking about police and those diversity hiring policies. West Yorkshire Police, one of our biggest police forces, where basically, you get priority for your candidacy if you're from an ethnic minority. Though we're told, no, at the end of the process, when people are hired, there'll be no priority for anyone because of their skin colour. Yeah, right. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Firstly, this has happened in 50 towns. So 5 local inquiries is going to potentially give partial answers to 5 of those towns, but what about the other 45? Secondly, local inquiries have no statutory basis, which means they can't compel witnesses and they can't compel evidence. So, of course, if you are a councillor or a council official who's been complicit in these horrible crimes and you can't be compelled to go to an inquiry, you're not going to go.
What a surprise, yeah.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 12:26 is the time. Benjamin Butterworth still with me, and let's get straight to your calls. Still coming in about police, in particular West Yorkshire Police, basically forcing a block on white applicants. They want to boost diversity in the area. They've got something like 30% of people from ethnic minority communities among the people they're policing, but they only got 9%. I would say only 9%. Seems to me to be a very high number of ethnic minority officers. So they're basically saying, if you are not white, you can apply all year round, and then at the end of the process we'll open it up to white people. But don't worry, very clear, no priority, they've stated, no priority will be given to candidates because of their race. But you're giving support and help and all year round applications to one group of people and not another. Of course you're giving them priority. Of course that's what it means. Let's give the phone lines, 0344 499 1000. Robert is on the line in Hertfordshire. Hello Robert, how are you?
I'm a little bit angry actually, but to be honest with you, look, it's racism. Plain and simple.
Call it what it is.
It's racism. If I'm going to go to court Monday morning, be treated differently to a person of colour, then it's racism.
Well, and that was what the Sentencing Council was planning, and now we've got the police saying, basically nodding a wink. At the end of the day, you're going to give more help to candidates coming from a different race from the majority of the population in this country.
Well, I'm going to say something a little bit avant-garde, I suppose. I think that people of colour in this country and different religions, i.e. Muslim, are more than well represented nowadays. Them days are over. Now, you've only got to look at TV, you've only got to look at the advertisements. We're even changing history so we can put black actors in the roles of...
There is exactly. When I grew up, I mean, there would be very few people of colour on television. But that's also because we were, I think, like a sort of 97% white country. But you're right, representation across the board seems to me to be, more, plenty and reasonable. I don't think you can grow up in this country as a child who is of Asian or Afro-Caribbean descent and think, I couldn't do that job, I couldn't be Prime Minister, I couldn't be, a leader of a bank, or I couldn't be a teacher or a police officer. These things are open. And look, there's always going to be racism, but that works both ways, by the way. There's plenty of racism in every ethnic group.
Yeah, I mean, it won't be long before we're having white lives matter. I mean...
apparently it's even racist to say that. People have lost their jobs for saying that in the past after Black Lives Matter.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a joke at first, but when you look around, I mean, I'm a retired project manager, and I used to do social housing, and I've done a lot of work in Newham, and there's actually blocks of flats, estates, Muslim-only housing. I mean...
the East End is incredibly segregated. Everyone says it's diverse. It's not. There's white, there's black, there's Bangladeshi, there's this. I mean, it's very segregated.
Yeah, and the thing, I think now woke, like I said the other day, woke is losing its fight. I think people don't care if you call. You might have listeners listening into what I'm saying I'm right wing. I'm not right wing. I'm just an ordinary Joe. Yep. I'm just an ordinary Joe. I'm not right-wing at all. But now people don't care if you call... you call me right-wing now, I don't care.
Isn't it interesting? But also, my thing is, I've felt the same way about, say, quotas for women. I don't see why we need to have 50% of women in certain jobs. We don't seem to worry about having 50% of men in certain jobs, like nursing or teaching in primary schools. No one seems to care about that. They only care when it's not women or ethnic minorities. Why, I mean, if we're going to have quotas, remember everyone getting in a tiz about the number of white players there were in the women's winning team, is it World Cup winning team? But was it Euros or Women or World Cup we won? But no one seemed to be bothered at all. We've got a lot of black players in the men's team. So if we're going to have quotas, well, let's have quotas. But it needs to be equal. But it only seems to matter when it's too many white people. And I just don't. I don't know about you. I wasn't brought up to see people because of the colour of their skin. I was just brought up to judge people based on what they say and what they do.
Well, I'm a grandson of a migrant, Italian migrant. I mean, I'm still a migrant. And I remember, I'm 72 now, but I remember being brought up in tenement buildings in Clerkenwell, and most of them were Greek, Irish, Italian, and we all got on, and I think the common denominator was none of us had anything.
Yeah, there is that, isn't there? Yeah, too busy dealing with the real world to worry about these things. Robert, thank you for your call. I understand your concerns there. Georgina's on the line. She's in London. Hi, Georgina.
Hello. And we're wearing the same colour.
You're in green as well?
Green. Wearing green.
Lovely.
For Benjamin, I just wanted to say, I understand now why he's championing the Labour Party if his pronouns are pay me.
We're going to get to pronouns in a few more minutes, actually, with Helen Joyce about this. But listen, what do you make of the police, insisting on diversity hires? Because the argument is that you should have police officers who look like the community they're policing.
Well, this is ridiculous. The Labour Party disagrees with any kind of common sense. There's no room for diversity within our police force. The person who gets the job should be the person most able and most capable of doing the job, no exceptions. This was shown in California by the diverse fire department. It was totally unfit for purpose.
Yeah.
And California paid the price for it. Do people not learn by these disasters?
But that's the thing. In no way would I assume that an Asian or a black candidate to be a police officer would be worse than a white candidate. But I don't know why they'd be better. And as long as people are not being discriminated against, like if you're not hiring someone because they're black or Asian, then frankly you should be nowhere near the police force because you're clearly racist. But I just don't see why the opposite should be okay.
Well, you're absolutely right. But the fact that the West Yorkshire police are now the grading applicants on a gold, silver, bronze basis. Bronze, obviously, being white British, because we're always at the bottom of the pile in the eyes of the Labour government for just about everything. And this is just racism in its entirety. We're being lectured day in day out, Julia, about racism, about being Islamophobic, having racist views towards Muslims. We must not have racist ideologies. But at the drop of a hat, the powers that be can be racist towards the white indigenous population.
I mean, they're insisting, no, there's no priority given, but there clearly is. We know this is a nod and a wink. We know that. And we've seen it even like in the Air Force, where they basically said, look, don't hire any, it's blatant, like, don't hire any more white, the emails have been shown, don't hire any more white people, we don't want any more white men, we need women and people from ethnic minorities. It should be utterly irrelevant. And you make such a good point about the California Fire Service. Georgina, thank you for that. Appreciate your call. Benjamin, that was a ridiculous thing, wasn't it, in California with the fire service? And it turns out, they were just doing videos. One woman, a very senior figure in the California Fire Service, was my pronouns are whatever they were, they and them, and she was saying, it doesn't matter whether I can't, or I'm a woman, I can't carry somebody out of the fire. Well, you shouldn't have been there when the fire happened, was basically her solution to the problem. It should be totally irrelevant.
I think, a lot of the places where they've talked about these diversity are jobs where they don't have enough people applying in the first place.
Yeah, as you said, yeah.
And so, if you're going to rank people in that way, well, OK, if you've got two people with exactly the same CV, maybe then you start to ask those questions. But that's not the problem we have. I
don't even think we should in that scenario, but there we are. Maybe years back when there really was an injustice that needed to be righted. But I just don't see it now. We've seen that what's happened in American colleges and the like. It's you basically letting in students from some ethnic minorities with lower grades, and then other ethnic minorities, like Asian kids, basically having to have much higher grades. We just call it what it is. It's racism. Anyway, let's talk about something completely different just a moment. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk about the absolute absurdity of the latest group to use the European Convention on Human Rights because they want to make sure that they get their full rights in this country and their rights to freedom of speech and the right to protest. That group is Hamas. I kid you not. That's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 12:37 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Benjamin Butterworth still with us. Delighted to be joined now by Andrew Fox. He's a defence expert and research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. Very good afternoon to you, Andrew.
Hi, Julia.
I can't believe the topic we're talking about because, again, I say this quite often, but generally you think, oh, is it April the 10th or did someone add that zero by accident? It's actually April the 1st. The most extraordinary situation. Hamas, the proscribed terrorist organisation, proscribed, by the way, because they are a terrorist organisation, is applying to the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, to appeal against this designation through the European Convention of Human Rights. They believe that the ban on the organisation and any support for the organisation, it breaches the Hamas supporters' human rights by unlawfully restricting their freedom of speech and their rights to protest. Quite apart from the fact that these people who support Hamas seem to be on BBC every single day and Sky News and marching in the streets every other Saturday with their banners, I'm not entirely sure how they've had any infringement on their freedoms. But this is patently absurd, isn't it?
Well, thank goodness somebody is finally standing up for this poor oppressed group. It's long overdue. But in all seriousness, it's beyond parody in some senses, but I think it's also indicative of a broader trend, which is concerning. We can all laugh at the fact that these murderous jihadis are misconstrued and that kind of thing, but our enemies are using the legal system that we created to try and protect our own rights against us. And we're seeing this time and time again. For example, the submission to the Met Police this week of 10 British, I assume Jewish men who went to fight for the IDF against Hamas in Gaza. They've been reported for war crimes to the Met Police. Yeah. Expand it even bigger, we've seen the ICC and the ICJ cases, which are both absolute farces. And
they're against Israel. They're remarkably unconcerned with any other country, but they're massively concerned with Israel.
Yeah, and it's a real trend, and it's a deeply serious abuse of the law. But it's becoming more and more common, and I do find that very concerning.
Indeed, and this is the crucial thing here when you talk about Hamas, because these pro-Palestinian marches, we're told they're pro-Palestinian. For a long time, I was defending the right. People have a right to protest. I feel very strongly about that. The fact they went on and on and on, the fact they started, by the way, before there was even a bullet fired by the IDF in Gaza, which I thought was a bit telling, but they were immediately started after the October the 7th attacks. The fact that people have been so blatantly anti-Semitic, just so blatant, not even pretending to hide it, and celebratory of what happened on October the 7th on these marches. Not everyone, but enough people, and the police have failed to act. I don't think anyone really genuinely thinks that Hamas is not being well represented. But explain to people who are new listeners, because I'm sure my established listeners will know well my views on this and the information on this. We can do this public service broadcasting, making sure people know stuff which doesn't seem to appear on the BBC. The actual background of Hamas, because people go, well, they're the elected government of the Palestinian people in Gaza, so how can they be a terrorist organisation? Tell us what they actually stand for and what they do.
Well, Hamas are an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, who've been around for a very long time, and that's a group, a fairly radical group who exist in a number of countries in the Middle East. But this offshoot of Hamas seized power in Gaza in 2007, off the top of my head, and since then they've run the place with an iron fist, and they had for a very long time an explicit aim to destroy the Jews, specifically the Jews.
It was in their constitution, isn't it?
It was. They've since removed it in a gesture of excellent good faith.
But the destruction of Israel
is their key aim. And obviously on 7th of October, they started this war that is still ongoing 18 months later.
Yeah, indeed. This is the thing, exactly. Do you think there's any chance that this appeal could work? I don't know if a judge gets to decide or if it is the Home Secretary, because at the end of the day, the Home Secretary knows this will be a disaster. But frankly, I have no faith in our justice system. I have no faith in lawyers at all anymore, given many recent decisions.
Yeah, well, especially with regards to Hamas, there have been some very worrying judicial decisions. Thinking of perhaps the two women who were celebrating 7th of October with paragliders on their T-shirts, who were let off. They were found guilty, but let off with no sentence at all. So I suppose if it does go in front of a judge, it's possible that the right judge for these lawyers would make a very concerning decision.
Yeah.
But one of the things they've said in their case is that Hamas is a protest group and it doesn't pose any threat to British citizens. And I would suggest that the Jewish community in the UK would feel very, very differently about that.
Absolutely. And again, a lot of those marches, there's sort of fortnightly marches in London over the last year and a half, they've absolutely insisted. We saw Jeremy Corbyn, lovely man, and John McDonnell, thank God, that never actually got into number 10. They were insisting and even took like a detour to go past synagogue on part of their route. It was absolutely vital to them to go past the synagogue on a Saturday, on the holy day for Jewish people. I mean, deliberately provocative stuff that wouldn't be allowed in any other scenario. They don't. I just don't even think they bother hiding it anymore. How blatantly anti-Semitic this organisation is and the cause that it espouses. But it is interesting. We haven't had any demonstrations in support of the people who say they're pro-Palestinian, but no support for the people who have been beaten, tortured, horrifically treated by Hamas fighters for standing up to Hamas and saying, look, we want Hamas out. You know, you're bringing this war onto us. The IDF are bombing us again because you won't release the hostages because you started this war. No one protesting against those people being hurt. It's only if a Jewish person hurts someone in Palestine that it seems to matter to them.
Yeah, and there are some absolutely horrific videos that have come out of Gaza in the last few weeks of revenge attacks and executions of people who've been leading the protests against Hamas in Gaza. So their brutality is not only against Israelis and Jews, it's also against anyone that opposes them.
Yeah.
And you know, there was a huge purge in Gaza just after they took over. They were executing their opponents that they'd defeated in elections. So it's pretty much on trend for them. And the fact that they are being represented in British courts is a true insult to our democracy and our legal system. It
really is. And again, there's also the idea that we need to be liberal, but there comes a point when, and accepting, but actually there comes a point when being liberal, we basically undermine our own liberal country by doing so. Andrew Fawkes, thank you for that. Defence expert, research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society for Military Man himself. Benjamin Butterworth, I mean, this does make a mockery of everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, of course. You'll have to call it the European Convention of Hamas rights if this gets anywhere. I mean, it's just a nonsense. You know, the human rights of Jewish people, of women, of gay people, all groups that someone that supports Hamas inevitably is going to hate. And why is it that it is only Jewish people and Israelis that are the target of this when, you know, Bashar al-Assad killed more Palestinians than the Israelis in the last 20 years, and yet I don't see protests against him on the streets. About a week ago or 2 weeks ago, when there were protests against Hamas in Gaza and they murdered some of those protesters.
Nothing.
Why didn't that spark
I mean, there was tumbleweed going across the fields. You know.
Exactly. Hamas doesn't care a damn for Palestinians or the people of Gaza. It just hates the Jewish people and hates Israel. It is motivated by hate. And there is nothing liberal and there is nothing human rights to tolerate people that are motivated by hate.
I think we need far more organisations with that sort of viewpoint being prescribed by our Home Secretary. But there we are. 12:45 is the time. Up next, going to talk to Helen Joyce from Sex Matters about again, another outrage. These young children, well, young teenagers, being forced to declare their pronouns as they take part in Britain's biggest debate competition, organised by the Oxford Union. Refuse. They're obvious. If you turn up, your name's Colin, we know what your pronouns are. I don't care if you want to say your preferred pronouns are they, them or she, her. If you're not a woman or you're not a man, you don't get to choose them in terms of just what the opposite ones. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
I'm looking forward to going around, eating rubbish wherever I can see.
By what date does the council think it will have reduced the backlog, reduced the rat population, and returned our streets to an acceptable state?
Councillor Mohammed, thank you to reply.
I myself haven't been up to Birmingham, but the councils are doing what councils are doing at the moment to try and reduce the rat populations and the bin waste all at the same time.
Firstly,
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Benjamin Butterworth's still here. Let's talk right now about the latest woke madness, because, it keeps on a-coming, does it not? And this is the latest from a massive competition, a big British debate competition. It's one of the biggest in the world, and it's run by the Oxford Union. And the competitors at the debate competition, aged between 14 and 18, have been instructed by the organisers to specify whether they are he, she, they, etc. at the start of each round. They have to constantly do it, and anyone who fails to comply with the equity policy could face disqualification from the contest with immediate effect. Let's talk about this with Helen Joyce. She's Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters. She's also author of the brilliant book Trans, Gender Identity and the New Battle for Women's Rights. Very good afternoon to you, Helen.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
I mean, I find it bad enough that I have to walk into a store with someone with my preferred pronouns. I don't care. You're a woman. I'm going to call you she and her, end of. Nothing to discuss. I use people's correct pronouns, not their preferred pronouns, which I think is polite and respectful to both them and to me and everyone else. But the idea that a 14-year-old who's been brave enough to get into this debate competition, to give their views, to make arguments, should be basically required to announce their pronouns, I find quite outrageous.
It's indoctrination, Julia. It's really that simple. What it is telling everybody that as a condition for being in this event, they have to show fealty really to this neo-religion that says that you're a man or you're a woman according to what you feel like rather than what you actually are. Yeah. So it's like they're all being told that they have to say, Jesus Christ died and was born again, he died for my sins or something before they start.
Yeah, it's
literally
false
before
speech.
every one
It's
of them.
enforced speech, isn't it? And that's it. People will say, well, what's the problem? I mean, okay, so if I was in the debate, I'd have to say my preferred pronouns are she and her. It's like, well, that's obvious. My name's Julia. I'm clearly a woman. Of course, those are my pronouns. Those would be the correct grammatical and biologically correct pronouns as well. So what's the issue? But the idea that anyone needs to be told those things is that it's insulting to expect me to have to tell them. I mean, it is an affront to our freedom of speech, isn't it, and our freedom of thought.
It absolutely is, and I highly suspect that it's not lawful even. Again, if we said that the only people who were allowed to be in this debate were people who were willing to state that they were devotees of Islam or devotees of the Catholic Church or something, and that if you're not one of those things, you're going to have to say something that proves that you are, pay lip service to it, we would see straight away how discriminatory this was. So this is discriminatory. They are discriminating against the great majority of people who don't think like this. Yeah. And also it's indoctrination of kids. I mean, the youngest age range there, 14. These are kids who maybe haven't thought about what it means to have free speech. They maybe don't know what it's like in countries where you don't have free speech. Yeah. And they know that if they, it's not just about not being allowed to take part. It's possibly about being booed or hissed or having your friends dislike you or having your teachers telling you off, because this has been framed as kind, polite and respectful instead of bullying and authoritarian.
And inclusive. And again, it's interesting that Lord Toby Young, the General Secretary of the Free Speech Union, a friend of our show, of course, he said this is unacceptable. What if the school children, he points out, are debating whether sex is an immutable biological characteristic or a social construct that's merely assigned at birth? By forcing them to declare their pronouns, as you say, it's a tacit acknowledgement that someone can become a member of the opposite sex, which they can't, I know they can't. can't. The vast majority of people know they can't. Apparently the Prime Minister still isn't quite sure about the whole penis status of some women's pants. But I mean, but this is the thing. It is forced on our kids. Most parents are completely unaware of how much gender ideology is now totally and utterly ingrained in the school system, in universities, and they just think, and again, it's being nice. I know people who've got kids at nursery where they do pride events. Again, why sexuality is being brought up with 3-year-olds is an absolute mystery to me, that's for sure. So it shouldn't even be gay pride anyway. But I wouldn't be bringing up, mummy and daddy and how they make babies with a 3-year-old either. It's inappropriate. But I just find it very, very bizarre how this has been allowed to happen. And we know we've had some problems certainly at the Oxford Union, and a lot of, in fact, weirdly, same with America, an awful lot of the top academic institutions have been among the worst when it comes to pushing this ideology. But we need people to stand up to it. We know that academics who stand up to it often end up being pushed out, basically being told, yeah, your future, your career's over. We've seen what happened to Kathleen Stock at the University of Sussex having to leave. But we also know how hard it is for students, for pupils. But what we really need is some of them to just say, I will not say this, refuse to do it, and we can start that trend, because we've seen that once and it's particularly women in young athletes, when they have just refused to play along with the madness of having to, box against a man or fence against a man, or recently play pool against a man, when they actually swim against a man in their own sex category, that when they actually stand up to it, it does make things change.
Can I suggest some wording for any child or young person who is in a situation like that? What I would say if it was me is I would say, I use sex-based pronouns for myself and everyone else, and I'm fine with other people making their own decisions about what they use.
Lovely.
And see where that gets them.
And that would be, I think, perfectly reasonable to everybody. This is what I do, and
you do you.
You do you. And that's the thing. But that's the thing, isn't it? When we're often told, often I have the reaction from people when it's on social media and conversations like this, they'll say, but why does it bother you? What's the problem for you? But it is a problem for us if people impose them and try and control our speech as well. Talk us through that.
I mean, they are bullying. They don't realise they're bullying, but it's often the case that people who bully do it in the name of kindness.
Yeah.
They think that something's kind, so they try to force other people to do that thing in the name of being kind. But I mean, I just want to say, no, you be kind.
Yeah.
I have my own head. I have my own thoughts inside it. I'm not telling you how to use your words. Yeah. Please don't tell me how to use my words. And both of us can continue quite happily like that, just as I, an atheist, can get on with family members who are Catholic. Exactly. I talk to people of all different religions and none, and I would not expect them to try to make me follow their creed's practices, and I certainly don't try to stop them from following their creed's practices. No. We just have to learn to live and let live.
And that used to be
my side is willing to do that.
Yes, and that was the thing. We're often told, well, on both sides there's been this. No, it really hasn't been. And in fact, I know a lot of women like you and me and others actually would have been using people's preferred pronouns, because we're trans people, or just because we wanted to be polite, wanted to be kind, and it's only when you get to a situation when it's forced speech, but also when a woman who's been raped is standing in court and being forced by a judge to refer to her rapist assailants as her and she, and say her penis. I think that's the point when most of us woke up and went, yeah, the time for politeness is over now. Now we're going to get back to reality. Helen Joy, she's been fantastic on this. She's from Sex Matters, also author of the brilliant book Trans. Thank you for that. Benjamin Butterworth, look, you're woke, and we know that a lot of the organisations that are pushing this are also talking often about gay rights. We know that Stonewall, a massive, wonderfully important, crucial role in fighting for gay rights. But, gay rights, we're just asking for gay people and bisexual people to have the same rights as straight people, as I believe 100% they should, and the vast majority of people do. Trans rights is about often taking women's rights, it often ends up being. And requiring people to announce their pronouns or to use someone else's preferred pronouns, saying basically you can't take part, even as a 14-year-old in a debate, because if you don't play along with this, that is unacceptable, isn't it?
Look, if somebody told me their pronouns were something other to what I assumed, I would go along with that. You wouldn't. But
no, I would a few years back, but now I wouldn't, no.
But I do think it's strange, and I think it's an ill result to force people to declare it at the start of their debate. I did school's Cambridge Union. This is Oxford Union. Mm-hmm. It was a really worthwhile and intellectually rigorous process. But it didn't matter what your sex or, for that matter, your gender identity was. That's not related to your ability to debate. It's not what you're being marked or judged on.
Bizarrely it is, these kids, because if you're not willing to play along with it... But again, I don't accept that anyone is born in the wrong body. I don't accept that anybody is non-binary. I don't accept that I need to care at any point about someone's sexuality or how they identify, or they're asexual or I simply have no interest in it. It is not an interesting fact about you. It's probably the least interesting thing about you or me. And a lot of it is just frankly made up absolute garbage and nonsense. So why should one be forced to play along with it? It's that in itself is, as Helen says, bullying and rude.
No, I think transgender people do exist, and they've always existed.
No, someone who believes they're born in the wrong body and wants to live as if they were the opposite gender exist. I'm not saying that they're a figment of my imagination or mine. I'm saying they are, however, they are not in fact born in the wrong body, and a man who claims that he is a woman is not in fact a woman. That they exist, they're just not what they claim to be.
But they are, and
no, but they're not.
You have people.
They're not. You see, if you told me you were a woman, you would not become a woman.
I'm not a woman. I don't feel like a woman. I don't wish to be.
And you believed you were a trans woman, and you claimed you were a woman, that wouldn't make you a woman, would it?
But it's not.
That wouldn't make you a woman. You know that.
But you also
Benjamin, you know that.
But you also.
So why are you pretending you believe something you don't believe?
But I'm not pretending to be a woman.
You said that those people that man would be a woman.
Yes.
So how does he magically become a woman because he says it, but you wouldn't magically become a woman if you said it?
Because it's not as simple as saying it. It's the fact that they know this